Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Story Relaxing. Tonight we slip quietly into a frontier homestead as a snowstorm tightens its grip around the walls. The kind of night where the dark feels closer than usual, and the wind seems to lean in curious about how you're doing. You step inside carrying the cold with you, snow dusting your boots, shoulders stiff from the long walk that felt short only because stopping was not an option. The door closes with a solid wooden sound, and for a moment you just stand there breathing, listening, letting the world outside rage without you. You probably won't survive this if you try it without preparation, and there's people who live this life knew that very well. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, and without any hurry at all, you let the night begin to unfold around you. The cabin is smaller than modern instincts expect. The walls feel close, not in a suffocating way, but in a protective one, like hands cupped around a candle flame. Outside, the snowstorm presses itself against the logs, not violently yet, just testing, whispering, finding its rhythm. Inside, the air smells faintly of smoke, damp wool and wood that has been cut and handled so often it seems to remember every winter it has survived. You set down what little you're carrying, maybe a lantern, maybe nothing at all, and you notice how quickly the quiet wraps around you once the door is shut. A mainstream historical fact slips in here as naturally as breath. Many frontier or homesteads in the 19th century were built quickly, with green logs often without proper insulation, because survival mattered more than comfort when winter arrived earlier than expected. You can feel that urgency in the walls. They are solid but imperfect. Tiny gaps between logs allow thin fingers of cold air to creep inside, reminding you that this shelter is a negotiation, not a guarantee. You move closer to the hearth where embers glow low and patient. The fire is not roaring. It does not need to. It only needs to exist. You crouch, stir it, gently coaxing warmth back into the room. There is a quiet skill to this learned by repetition rather than instruction. Settlers understood that a fire burning too hot wasted precious fuel, while one allowed to fade too far invited danger. Historians still argue whether most frontier families slept with fires fully banked overnight, or let them burn low and risky, depending on region wood supply and personal habit. You feel that debate settle into your bones as you judge the embers with tired eyes. As the fire responds, light stretches across the floor in soft, uneven shapes. Shadows climb the walls and settle into corners. You notice how the storm sounds different now that you are inside. The wind no longer feels endless. It has edges. It hits the cabin slides along the logs, then moves on like waves against a sturdy boat. Snow taps at the small window, a quiet, persistent sound that somehow feels louder than heavy snowfall ever does. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts as you warm your hands. Some frontier families believed that sealing cracks with mixtures that included mud straw, and sometimes even animal hair, improved warmth and brought good luck through the winter. Whether the luck came from superstition or simply better insulation is up for interpretation, but you can imagine the care that went into packing every gap before nights like this one arrived. You shrug out of your outer layers slowly. Not all of them, just enough to move comfortably. Heavy coats stay close by within reach. You hang damp wool near the fire, careful not to let it scorch. The smell of wet fabric warms and deepens, joining the smoke in the air. It is not unpleasant. It is grounding. You take another breath and feel your shoulders drop as your body realizes it can stop fighting the cold for a moment. Outside, the storm thickens. Snow piles against the base of the cabin building, a quiet wall that muffles sound even further. This is one of those strange frontier contradictions. The snowstorm that threatens travel and life also insulates, softening the wind, sealing warmth inside. You feel oddly grateful for that as you settle into the space, listening to the wind lose its sharp edge. You move through familiar motions, checking the latch on the door, making sure it is snug, then glancing at the roof beams overhead. They look steady dark lines against darker shadows. Snow will gather up there tonight, heavy and cold. You trust the roof because you have to. People on the frontier learn to trust structures they built themselves even when those structures were far from perfect. You finally sit maybe on a rough bench or a low stool close enough to the fire to feel it on your face. Your fingers tingle as warmth returns. There is a quiet moment where you simply exist, not thinking about sleep yet, just listening. Wind, fire, the soft tick of settling wood. These sounds become your world. Another mainstream fact slips gently into the night. Frontier homesteaders were often positioned with practical survival in mind, sometimes facing away from prevailing winter winds to reduce heat loss and snow buildup. You feel that wisdom now, as the storm moves past rather than directly into the cabin, like a predator circling but not striking. As minutes pass, the cold inside eases slightly. Not enough to make you forget it, but enough to make it manageable. You begin to feel tired in that deep bone-level way that comes from physical effort and constant alertness. This is not the exhaustion of modern overwork. It is simpler, heavier. It pulls you downward, inviting you to sit longer, to blink slower. You glance once more at the door, then the window, then the fire. Everything is as it should be for now. The storm will do what it does. You will respond as needed. That understanding settles your thoughts. Sleep does not arrive yet, but it no longer feels distant. You shift your weight, preparing for the night ahead, aware that this is only the beginning. The storm is still building, and so is your awareness of what it means to rest in a place like this. For now, you let the warmth hold you. Let the sounds blend together, and allow the edges of the day to soften. The fire has settled into a steady rhythm now, no longer demanding your full attention, just a watchful glance now and then. You shift closer, then back again, learning the invisible line where warmth feels comforting instead of sharp. Heat in a frontier cabin is uneven and personal. One side of your body warms while the other still remembers the cold. You rotate slowly the way people have done for centuries, turning yourself like a piece of bread held near a flame, patient and practical. Light matters almost as much as heat. You adjust the lantern or candle, careful with every movement. Too much flame risks smoke and wasted fuel. Too little, and the darkness presses in, fast, heavy and complete. Before electricity, winter nights stretched endlessly, and frontier families learned to ration light the same way they rationed food. A well-known historical reality is that candles and lamp oil were often used sparingly save for essential tasks rather than comfort. You feel that discipline guide your hand as you lower the flame just enough to see, but not enough to glow. The walls around you seem to breathe as the temperature changes. Logs expand slightly near the fire, then contract as the wind cools the far side of the cabin. Soft popping sounds travel through the wood, not loud enough to alarm, just enough to remind you that this structure is alive in its own way. You listen closely, learning the language of the cabin. A sharp crack might mean trouble. These gentle sounds mean adjustment, not danger. You take stock of what warmth you have created. The fire, the layers of clothing still wrapped around you, the thick air holding smoke and heat close to the floor. None of it feels luxurious, but it feels sufficient. And sufficiency is a powerful thing on nights like this. You think about how settlers planned their homes around a single heat source, often sleeping, eating, and living within reach of the hearth. It was not just a fireplace, it was the heart of survival. A quieter, more curious thought slips in. Some frontier families place stones near the fire during the day, then move them closer to sleeping areas at night to release stored heat slowly. It was an improvised version of thermal mass learned through observation rather than science. Whether it truly made a measurable difference is something scholars still debate, but the practice speaks to the constant creativity demanded by cold. You test the air near the floor with your hand. It is colder there, heavy and slow, settling like water. Heat rises, leaving your feet vulnerable. You wiggle your toes inside thick socks, then tuck them closer to the fire for a moment. Cold travels upward patiently. It never rushes. It waits until you forget it is there. The storm outside grows louder. Again, wind lifting snow and throwing it against the cabin walls. The sound is deeper now, muffled by the drifting snow that has begun to pile up. This is another strange comfort. Snow blocks sound and seals cracks, wrapping the cabin in a soft white silence. You remember hearing that some homesteaders actually hoped for heavy snowfall early in winter for this reason. A thick blanket of snow could mean warmer nights inside, at least until spring thaw brought new problems. You stand briefly to tend the fire once more, adding a single piece of wood and nudging embers into place. Flames rise, then calm. You resist the urge to add more. Fuel must last the night. This balance between now and later shapes every decision. Historians still argue whether most settlers slept lightly out of habit, or necessity, waking often to check fires and weather. As you watch the flames settle, you suspect the answer is both. The smell of smoke deepens as fresh wood catches, curls into your clothes, your hair, your skin. This scent will follow you even after the storm passes, a quiet record of the night. You inhale slowly, and instead of irritation, you feel steadied. These smells mean warmth. They mean life continuing inside while winter rages outside. You return to your seat, pulling a blanket or heavy cloth around your shoulders. Fabric rustles softly. Every sound feels louder now that you are listening for it. The cabin is not silent, it is speaking constantly, just in a low voice. Wind along the roof, snow sliding down the walls, the fire breathing, wood settling. You begin to recognize patterns, which sounds repeat and which ones fade. Familiarity brings calm. Light flickers, casting slow-moving shadows across the ceiling. Your eyes follow them without effort. This kind of watching feels different from modern distraction. There is nothing demanding your focus. No sharp edges, just movement gentle enough to carry your thoughts along. You feel your body sinking, muscles releasing tension you did not realize they were holding. A simple, widely accepted truth drifts through your mind. Frontier families often went to bed earlier during winter, not out of discipline, but because darkness, limited activity, and conserving resources mattered. You feel that rhythm guiding you now. The night feels long, but it also feels meant for rest, for stillness, for waiting. You adjust the fire one last time before sleep-banking embers carefully creating a mound of glowing red that promises warmth without hunger. This is not guesswork. It is knowledge passed hand to hand, generation to generation. You trust it even as a small part of you remains alert. The wind howls again, stronger now, but it no longer startles you. You understand its voice better. You draw the blanket tighter and let your gaze soften. Warmth is thin but present. Light is dim but enough. Comfort exists here not as luxury, but as balance. As you prepare to lie down, you realize that sleep in a frontier homestead begins long before your eyes close. It starts with managing light and heat, with listening and adjusting, with accepting that comfort is something you actively create. The storm continues its work outside, but inside you have done what you can. For now, that is enough. You ease yourself down, not all the way to sleep yet, just into a position where resting feels possible. The firelight dims slightly as embers settle, and the cabin shifts into a deeper quiet. This is the hour when sound becomes your main companion. With your eyes half closed, you begin to map the night by listening, letting each noise place itself gently in your awareness. The wind speaks first. It moves around the cabin in uneven waves, rising and falling rather than blowing straight through. Sometimes it presses hard against one wall, then drifts off and tests another, as if searching for weakness. You hear it slide along the logs, then lift, then return again. Over time, the pattern becomes familiar, almost predictable. This is not the sound of a storm trying to tear the cabin apart. It is the sound of a storm settling in for the long night. The wood answers back in its own language. Soft creaks echo from the walls and ceiling as the temperature shifts. The logs tighten and loosen, with each change in warmth responding to fire and cold like living things. Frontier families learn to read these sounds with care. A slow creak meant adjustment. A sudden sharp snap meant attention. You listen closely, cataloguing what you hear, letting concern fade as the familiar noises repeat themselves without change. A simple historical truth surfaces here. Many frontier cabins were built without nails, relying instead on notched logs stacked carefully for strength. This method allowed structures to flex slightly under pressure from wind and snow. You feel that flexibility now in every quiet movement of the walls, and it reassures you more than rigid silence ever could. Snow adds its own layer to the soundscape. At first it falls softly, almost politely brushing against the roof and window. Then it thickens, the sound deepening as layers build up. You hear small slides as clumps release themselves and fall away. Each one sends a brief pulse of alertness through you, but nothing follows. The roof holds. The cabin remains steady. A quirky bit of frontier wisdom drifts through your thoughts. Some settlers believed that listening carefully to the snow on the roof could warn of collapse long before it happened. Whether this belief saved lives or simply gave people something to listen for is debated, but the habit of listening itself clearly mattered. You find yourself doing the same, alert but not afraid. Inside, the fire responds to shifts in air pressure, flaring slightly when wind finds a crack, then settling again. The sound is gentle, a low whisper punctuated by occasional pops. You recognize these as harmless. A burning knot releasing sap. A piece of wood adjusting its position. Each sound is brief and contained. You shift your weight slightly and the bedding beneath you responds with a dull rustle. This is no modern mattress. It is firm, uneven, layered with straw or fabric that compresses rather than springs. Comfort here is about stability, not softness. You feel the floor beneath solid and unyielding, grounding you in place. Historians still argue whether frontier settlers slept more lightly than people do today, or whether exhaustion simply carried them into deeper rest. Lying here listening to every sound, you suspect sleep came in waves, light at first, deep later, always ready to break if something changed. Your body seems to understand this without instruction. The storm outside grows louder for a while, wind lifting snow and driving it harder against the cabin. The sound fills the night, leaving little room for thought. Then just as suddenly it eases. The quiet that follows feels heavy, pressing down like a blanket. You hold your breath for a moment, waiting for something to happen, then let it go when nothing does. In that quiet, small sounds become clear: the faint hiss of embers, the soft click of cooling wood, your own breathing slower, now deeper. You adjust your blanket, tucking it closer around your shoulders. Fabric slides against fabric, a sound so soft it barely exists. You begin to notice how your mind responds to these sounds. At first, each noise demanded attention. Now they blend together, forming a steady background hum. This shift feels important. It marks the point where vigilance gives way to trust. The cabin has proven itself, at least for now. A mainstream historical fact settles gently into your awareness. Many frontier families shared single-room cabins, meaning everyone slept within earshot of everyone else. Sound was communal. Any unusual noise was immediately noticed. Even alone, you feel that instinct guiding you, tuned to change rather than constant noise. Another small thought surfaces, half remembered. Some settlers hung tools or small objects near doors or windows so they would rattle if disturbed. It was an early warning system, simple and effective. Whether this practice was widespread or only occasional is still discussed, but the idea fits the night you are experiencing now. Sound is safety. The wind returns, but softer this time, almost tired. It brushes the cabin rather than pushing against it. Snow continues to fall, but more gently. The storm has settled into a steady rhythm, and your body mirrors it. Breathing slows. Muscles soften. Your awareness widens, then begins to narrow again. You lie still, not forcing sleep, letting it arrive on its own terms. The cabin holds. The fire breathes. The storm continues its work outside, but it no longer feels personal. It is simply weather doing what weather has always done. As the sounds fade into a single familiar pattern, you realize that this listening is part of rest. It is how frontier nights eased people into sleep one sound at a time. You remain aware but not tense balance between wakefulness and rest as the night carries you forward. You lower yourself the rest of the way down now, committing to sleep, or at least to the attempt of it. The surface beneath you gives very little, just a faint shift as straw and fabric settle into new shapes. This is not the kind of softness that disappears under your weight. It pushes back, reminding you exactly where your body meets the floor. Your shoulders notice first, then your hips, then the long line of your spine. You adjust carefully, learning where pressure eases and where it lingers. Frontier bedding was never designed to impress. Accounts from the period consistently describe mattresses stuffed with straw, corn husks, dried grasses, or whatever material was available and cheap. Over time, these fillings flattened, shifted, and broke down, creating uneven support that required constant repositioning. You feel that reality now as you slide an arm slightly higher, then lower, till the tension eases just enough to stay still. The straw whispers softly when you move. It has its own sound, dry and faint like leaves brushed together. There is a smell too earthy and clean mixed with smoke and wool. It is not unpleasant, but it is unmistakable. You realize this scent will cling to everything, even your dreams, anchoring them firmly in this place. You pull a blanket closer, its weight reassuring rather than heavy. Blankets here are not decorative. They are tools. Thick wool may be patched in places, holds heat while allowing enough breath to keep moisture from building. Many settlers relied on layered coverings instead of a single heavy one, adjusting through the night as temperatures shifted. You understand why as you test the balance between warmth and comfort, careful not to trap cold air inside. Your head rests on something that barely deserves the name pillow. It might be a folded coat, a sack of spare clothing, or a small cushion filled with the same straw as the mattress. It does not cradle your neck so much as support it, keeping your head from rolling. You turn once then again before finding a position that feels stable. Comfort here is a negotiation, not a guarantee. Some personal diaries from the frontier mention sleeping positions chosen carefully to conserve warmth. Curling inward, tucking knees close, keeping arms folded rather than stretched. You notice your body doing this naturally, drawing itself into a compact shape without instruction. There is an old intelligence in this response, something learned long before written history. A lesser-known detail surfaces as you settle. In colder regions, people sometimes placed boards beneath bedding to lift themselves slightly off frozen floors. This reduced heat loss and kept moisture from seeping upward. Whether this practice was common everywhere remains uncertain, but lying here you can easily imagine the relief of even a few inches of separation from the cold wood below. The floor presses back, steadily cool but not biting. Cold travels upward slowly, patiently. You can feel it through the mattress, a muted presence rather than a sharp one. Your blanket and clothing work together to slow it down, creating a fragile buffer that must last until morning. You shift again, smaller this time, then still yourself. Each movement steals a little warmth, so you choose them carefully now. The fire crackles softly in the background, its glow faint but steady. You do not look at it directly. You feel it instead, a gentle warmth against one side of your body, uneven but welcome. Researchers studying frontier domestic life often note how sleep was treated as an extension of daily labour rather than a separate experience. Rest was practical, it served tomorrow. That idea settles into your thoughts as you lie here. Sleep is not indulgence tonight, it is preparation. Your mind wanders briefly to modern beds, thick mattresses, soft pillows, climate-controlled rooms. The comparison feels distant rather than tempting. Here the simplicity sharpens your awareness. Every sensation is clear. The firmness beneath you, the warmth above, the sounds around you. Nothing fades into background noise completely. You listen to your breathing slow. Inhale, exhale. The straw beneath you compresses a little more with each breath, then holds. It will not soften further. You accept that. Acceptance comes easily when there are no alternatives. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how chronic discomfort shaped frontier sleep patterns. Some suggest people slept in shorter intervals, waking often to adjust position or tend fires. Others believe exhaustion overruled discomfort most nights. As your body settles, you sense both might be true. You're aware of every pressure point, yet fatigue pulls you downward all the same. A small creak travels through the Chin as the wind shifts outside, so you tense briefly, then relax when nothing follows. The bedding holds, the floor holds, the cabin holds. That realization loosens something in your chest. You turn your head, slightly adjusting the makeshift pillow. Your neck finds a better angle. It is not perfect, but it is workable. Workable matters more than perfect ever could in a place like this. Your thoughts begin to slow drifting between sensation and memory. The smell of straw blends with smoke. The sound of wind blends with breath. The firmness beneath you no longer feels intrusive. It feels grounding. As you lie there, you realize that sleep on the frontier was built on adaptation. Bodies learn to accept firmness, unevenness, and cold because resistance only wasted energy. You follow that lesson now, letting your muscles release one by one. The storm continues outside, but your attention narrows inward. The mattress does not change. The floor does not warm. Yet your perception of them shifts. What once felt hard now feels steady. What felt uncomfortable now feels familiar. You exhale slowly, deeper than before, and allow your weight to sink fully into the bedding. The night stretches ahead, long and cold, but for this moment you have found a position that works. That is enough. You stay still for a while, letting your body decide whether it is finally ready to rest. The air around you cools slightly as the fire settles again, and you respond without thinking, reaching for another layer. Sleeping on the frontier is less about what you wear during the day and more about how you arrange yourself at night. Clothing becomes part of the bedding, each piece chosen not for style, but for how well it traps heat. You pull on a thicker shirt or wrap a spare garment around your torso. Wool scratches faintly against skin, but it holds warmth better than softer fabrics ever could. Settlers relied heavily on wool because it retained heat even when damp, a quality that mattered. In cabins where snow melted on boots and steam rose from bodies coming in out of the cold. You feel that practicality now as warmth slowly builds beneath the layers. Your legs draw closer together, knees slightly bent, reducing the space your body has to heat. This posture is not taught. It emerges naturally, guided by comfort and instinct. Observations from early travellers often mention how frontier sleepers curled inward during winter nights, conserving warmth in ways that echoed far older human habits. You become part of that pattern without effort. The blanket shifts as you adjust its weight, settling across your shoulders and hips. Air pockets form and collapse, tiny changes that make a surprising difference. You tuck the edge under your chin, careful not to block your breathing. Warmth pools slowly, uneven at first, then steadier as minutes pass. A lesser-known habit comes to mind as you settle. Some families shared bedding, not out of sentiment but efficiency, knowing that shared body heat made winter nights more bearable. Accounts vary on how common this was across regions, but lying here alone you can easily understand the logic. Even without another person, you find yourself arranging layers to mimic that shared warmth, creating barriers and pockets that hold heat close. Your feet remain the most difficult to warm. Cold lingers there, stubbornly creeping in through the floor. You add another layer around them, maybe a folded cloth or extra sock, then wait. Warming feet takes patience. It cannot be rushed. You flex your toes, slowly encouraging circulation, then let them rest. Those studying frontier health have noted that poor circulation in cold conditions was a constant concern, especially during long winters. People learn to recognize numbness early and respond quickly. You remain aware of your feet checking sensation now and then, but without anxiety. They respond gradually, the cold retreating inch by inch. The fire whispers softly, sending out occasional bursts of warmth. You angle your body slightly to catch it, then stop moving. Each adjustment costs energy and heat. Stillness becomes a skill learned through repetition. You practice it now, breathing slowly, letting warmth build instead of chasing it. Your hands are tucked close to your chest, fingers curled lightly. Gloves stay on thin but effective. Removing them might feel better briefly, but you know the cold would return faster than warmth could. Frontier accounts often describe sleeping fully dressed during winter, sometimes even with coats on. You understand why. Clothing here is insulation, not inconvenience. The storm outside continues, but it feels farther away now, muted by walls and snow. Wind slides along the cabin rather than striking it directly. You feel protected in a quiet, practical way, not because the cabin is perfect, but because it is enough. There is debate among scholars about how much sleep clothing restricted movement and comfort versus how much it improved rest by preserving warmth. Lying here, you suspect the answer changed with the temperature. On nights like this, warmth outweighs comfort. The slight stiffness is a fair trade for not shivering. Your breathing deepens. Each exhale warms the air inside your coverings, creating a small pocket of comfort that grows with every breath. The smell of wool, straw and smoke blends into something familiar, something that signals safety. Your shoulders drop a little lower as tension fades. You become aware of your heartbeat steady and slow. Cold no longer dominates your awareness. It exists at the edges, held at bay by layers and stillness. This balance feels fragile but stable, like a truce that will last as long as you respect its terms. The night stretches on, but you no longer measure it in hours. You measure it in warmth, gained in muscles, relaxing in the gradual quieting of your thoughts. Each layer does its work silently. Each breath reinforces the warmth you have built. As sleep approaches, you realize that frontier nights trained people to listen closely to their own bodies. Shivering, numbness, restlessness all carried information. Ignoring them was dangerous. You remain tuned in, aware without worry, responding when needed, and resting when you can. The fire settles again and the cabin cools slightly. You respond by tucking your chin, pulling the blanket a fraction closer, then stilling yourself once more. No rush, no excess movement, just enough. Warmth stabilizes. The cold pauses its advance. Your body finally agrees that this arrangement will hold for a while. With that agreement, your thoughts soften further, drifting toward rest. The storm continues its work outside, but inside you have found a balance between layers, heat and stillness. Wrapped in wool and patience, you let sleep draw closer, one slow breath at a time. Sleep comes close now, hovering just beyond reach, but the world outside refuses to disappear completely. You sense it through the window, a dark square set into the wall, where the storm quietly performs its slow work. Even without opening your eyes, you know snow is gathering there, layering itself inch by inch, softening the shape of everything it touches. You shift slightly so you can see it better, lifting your head just enough to catch the faint glow reflecting off the glass. Snow moves past in uneven sheets, sometimes thick, sometimes thin, always steady. It clings briefly, then slides away, leaving faint trails before filling them again. The outside world feels distant now, reduced to movement and light rather than danger. Frontier homes rarely had large windows. Glass was expensive and fragile, and openings meant heat loss. Many cabins make do with small panes or coverings that could be sealed tightly during storms. You feel grateful for that restraint as you watch snow press against the glass, knowing the cold remains mostly outside where it belongs. The storm changes the shape of the night. Sound dulls further as snow piles up, creating a thick, quiet barrier. Wind still moves, but its voice is softened, rounded, almost gentle now. You notice how the silence feels heavier than before, like a blanket laid over the world. Your breath fogs faintly in the cooler air near the window. You watch it for a moment, the slow rise and fall, then let your gaze soften. Breath becomes something you notice without thinking, steady and calm, a sign that your body has found a rhythm it likes. There is something oddly comforting about watching snow erase the landscape. Trees vanish first, then fences, then any trace of paths or distance. Everything beyond the cabin becomes a blank page. For settlers, this disappearance could feel both peaceful and unsettling. Letters and journals describe moments of quiet awe mixed with anxiety about isolation. You feel a trace of both as you lie there warm enough for now, aware that the world outside has narrowed dramatically. A lesser-known winter habit comes to mind. Some families marked window frames with simple notches or lines to track snowfall depth during long storms. It gave them a sense of control, a way to measure what could otherwise feel endless. You do not mark anything tonight, but you understand the impulse. Watching snow accumulate gives shape to time when hours blur together. The window glass radiates cold, faintly a steady presence you can feel even from a short distance. You angle your body away from it, instinctively choosing the warmer side of the room. Heat clings closer to the fire, thinning as it reaches the walls. You settle into that gradient without thought, letting your body find its preferred balance. Snow slides again heavier. Time, and you pause, listening. The sound is low and brief, not alarming. Roof and walls hold. You release the tension in your shoulders and return your attention inward. There has long been discussion among historians about how snowstorms altered daily routines on the frontier. Some suggest people used storms as forced rest periods, conserving energy and supplies. Others argue anxiety kept many awake, listening for signs of collapse or intrusion. Lying here, you sense how both could be true. The storm encourages stillness, but it also demands awareness. You let your eyes close halfway, then open again, watching the window through heavy lashes. Snowfall becomes hypnotic when viewed like this, patterns repeating without urgency. It invites your thoughts to slow, to follow, rather than lead. The cabin feels smaller now, but not cramped. Snow has pressed in from all sides, sealing you into a warm pocket of space. The walls feel thicker, the roof closer. This closeness feels protective rather than restrictive, like being held rather than trapped. You tuck your blanket a little tighter, careful not to disturb the warmth you have built. Small adjustments only. Each movement is measured economical. Frontier life rewarded efficiency, especially at night. Wasted effort meant lost heat, lost rest. Your breathing deepens again, syncing with the steady pace of falling snow. Inhale, exhale. The world outside continues without you, and that realization brings relief. There is nothing you need to do right now but rest. Snow continues to pile against the cabin, insulating, further quieting the storm's edges. You feel the temperature inside stabilizes slightly, helped by that growing white barrier. It is one of winter's quiet contradictions, danger and comfort arriving together. You glance once more at the window, then let your eyes close fully this time. The image of falling snow lingers behind your eyelids, soft and slow. It follows you inward as thoughts begin to drift. You think briefly about morning, about how the world will look reshaped and silent when light returns. Paths gone, familiar landmarks softened. But that thought feels distant, unnecessary now. Morning will come whether you think about it or not. For now, the snowstorm wraps the cabin in stillness. The window no longer feels like a boundary between safety and danger. It feels like a lens, allowing you to witness the storm without being part of it. Your muscles relax further. The last bits of tension slip away as the rhythm of snowfall replaces the rhythm of thought. Outside, snow continues to fall. Inside, you drift closer to sleep, carried by quiet and the steady promise of shelter. The night deepens around you, and with it the sounds of the homestead grow more noticeable. They do not announce themselves loudly. Instead, they slip into your awareness in layers subtle and steady, asking only that you listen. You lie still, eyes closed now, letting each sound arrive and fade without chasing it. Somewhere close by, beneath the floor or just beyond the wall, an animal shifts its weight. The movement is slow and deliberate, followed by a soft exhale. Livestock were often sheltered close to living spaces during winter, sometimes beneath the same roof or in lean-tos pressed tight against the cabin. This was practical, not sentimental. Animals added warmth, their bodies radiating heat that seeped upward through wood and earth. You sense that warmth now, faint but real, like a quiet reassurance that you are not alone in this storm. Another sound follows, a low shuffle, a hoof scraping gently against packed ground. Then stillness again. These noises do not startle you. They settle you. They confirm that life continues nearby, steady and calm. For frontier families, these sounds were part of the nightly landscape, as familiar as wind or fire. Silence from the animals would have been far more unsettling. You adjust your blanket slightly, not because you are cold, but because awareness has sharpened. Sound travels differently at night, especially during snowstorms. Snow absorbs and bends noise, making nearby sounds feel closer, while distant ones disappear entirely. You notice how the animal sounds seem intimate, almost inside the cabin, while the wider world has faded to nothing. A small detail surfaces as you listen. Some settlers deliberately positioned animal shelters on the windward side of their homes, allowing barns or pens to break gusts before they reached the cabin walls. This arrangement offered both warmth and protection. Whether this practice was universal or depended on land and materials remains unclear, but it reflects a careful understanding of how sound, wind, and heat move through space. The wind shifts again, but its voice is muted now, filtered through snow and structure. Instead of a howl, it produces a long, low hum, like breath moving through a narrow passage. You notice how the cabin responds, not with alarm, but with gentle creaks that feel almost conversational. The structure answers the weather, and the exchange continues quietly without you needing to intervene. Another animal sound reaches you softer this time, perhaps a small snort or the settling of a body against straw. You imagine the warmth gathered there, bodies close together, conserving energy in the same way you are. The thought brings a surprising sense of comfort. Survival here is collective even when you sleep alone. Historical letters from winter homesteads often describe animals as emotional anchors during storms, their presence easing fear and marking time. Nights felt less endless when there were signs of life moving and breathing nearby. You feel that truth now, listening, without opening your eyes, letting the sounds reassure you that the night is unfolding as it should. You breathe slowly, matching the pace of the quiet around you. Inhale, exhale. The air feels slightly warmer than before, helped by a body's fire and snow all working together. This layered warmth is fragile but effective, built from many small contributions, rather than one overwhelming source. Your mind drifts briefly, imagining how mornings after storms often began with checking animals, first ensuring they weathered the night safely. That responsibility shaped how people slept, keeping one ear tuned for distress. Even now, a small part of you remains alert, not anxious, just aware. There is uncertainty among researchers about how often animals were brought fully inside cabins during extreme cold. Some accounts mention it regularly, others rarely at all. What seems clear is that animals were kept close whenever possible, their presence valued not only for survival, but for the quiet steadiness they brought to winter nights. You feel your muscles soften further as nothing changes. No urgent sounds, no sudden movement, just breathing and the occasional shift of weight. The night feels long, but it also feels manageable, broken into moments like this rather than hours. Your thoughts slow again, drifting between awareness and rest. Sound becomes texture rather than message. The shuffle of hooves blends with the crackle of embers. Wind hums softly in the distance. Together they form a kind of rhythm, not quite music, but close enough to carry you. You realize that these sounds would have shaped dreams as well. Sleep on the frontier was never silent, and dreams likely carried echoes of the waking world. Animals wind fire, all slipping into imagination without clear boundaries. You let that possibility float by without holding on to it. The cabin remains steady. The animals remain calm. The storm continues its quiet work outside. You rest within this small pocket of warmth and sound, supported by more than just walls and blankets. As your breathing deepens once more, the sounds around you fade into the background, not disappearing, but becoming part of the night's fabric. They no longer demand attention. They simply exist. Wrapped in layered warmth and quiet reassurance, you drift further towards sleep, carried by the steady presence of life nearby and the gentle understanding that for now, everything is as it should be. Sometime later, not marked by any clock or sound you can name, A thought slips into your half-sleep and pulls you gently upward. It is not fear exactly, it is awareness. The kind that settles into people who have learned that warmth must be maintained, not assumed. Your eyes remain closed, but your attention drifts toward the hearth, sensing the state of the fire without seeing it. The heat feels thinner, now still present but less confident. The air near your face has cooled just enough to be noticeable. This is familiar territory. People who live through long winters learn to recognize this shift instinctively. It is the difference between a fire that will last until morning and one that needs help before it forgets itself entirely. You listen for the fire rather than looking. The sound has changed, fewer pops, more silence between breaths of heat. Embers whisper instead of speak. That tells you enough. You sigh quietly, not annoyed, just resigned, and begin the careful process of waking without fully waking. Your body resists at first, muscles heavy, limbs reluctant. Leaving warmth always costs something. Still you move slowly, deliberately, sliding one leg out from under the blanket, then the other. Cold immediately makes its presence known, sharp and honest. You pause, letting your circulation adjust, then continue. Feet touch the floor. The cold there is patient and deep. It does not shock so much as remind. You stand carefully, weight settling through stiff joints, and reach for an extra layer before taking a single step. This small ritual repeats across generations. Move slowly, cover skin, waste no heat. People living in frontier cabins often slept lightly during winter, waking briefly to tend fires or check weather conditions. Journals and household accounts describe these moments as routine rather than disruptive. Night was not a single stretch of sleep. It was a series of rests separated by small acts of maintenance. You feel that rhythm guiding you now. You cross the room quietly, mindful of every sound. Wood creaks underfoot louder. At night, amplified by stillness. You place each step with care, toes first, then heel, letting weight settle gradually. The fire waits a low red glow beneath a thin layer of ash. You crouch close enough to feel faint warmth against your face. Embers pulse gently like something breathing in its sleep. You stir them carefully, exposing brighter coals beneath. A soft glow responds, spreading outward. You add a small piece of wood, not too much, just enough to feed what is already there. Flame flickers briefly, then settles. Smoke curls upward, familiar and steady. You watch closely, judging the balance. Too much flame risks waking the cabin fully. Too little risks losing heat altogether. This judgment was learned through experience rather than instruction. Many settlers could read a fire the way others read weather or mood. You trust yourself to do the same. There are scattered mentions in personal letters of people keeping specific nightwood aside, smaller pieces chosen for quiet feeding rather than bright burning. Whether this was common practice or simply personal habit varies, but it makes sense here. The goal is warmth, not light. Continuity, not display. You wait a moment, making sure the fire has accepted the offering. Embers brighten, heat increases subtly. Satisfied, you nudge ash into place, creating a protective layer that will slow the burn. The fire settles again, stronger now, but calm. You stand slowly, joints protesting softly, then turn back toward your bed. The room feels slightly warmer already, or perhaps your body has simply adjusted. Either way, the balance feels restored. As you return to your blankets, a thought passes through you. Some modern interpretations suggest that frequent nighttime waking would have been exhausting or disruptive. Others argue that segmented sleep was natural and well adapted to pre-industrial life. The historical record does not offer a single answer. What you feel now suggests that these brief wakings are not interruptions but part of the rhythm itself. You slide back under the covers, careful to trap warmth quickly. Cold clings for a moment, then retreats as layers do their work. You pull the blanket up, tuck it around your shoulders, and curl slightly inward again. Your heart rate slows. Breathing steadies. The fire resumes its quiet presence in the background, no longer demanding attention. The cabin seems content, settled once more. Outside, the storm continues, but it feels distant now, muted by snow and routine. You no longer listen for danger. You listen for continuity, wind, fire, breath. Your body releases tension again, muscles sinking into their familiar shapes against straw and cloth. The interruption fades quickly, leaving behind a sense of reassurance rather than restlessness. You did what was needed. The night can continue. Sleep returns not as a sudden drop, but as a gentle slide. Thoughts loosen, edges soften. Awareness dims without vanishing entirely. The fire breathes steadily. The cabin holds. You drift back into rest, carrying with you the quiet knowledge that even in the middle of winter, even in the dark, care and attention keep the night manageable. Wrapped once more in warmth and routine, you let yourself sink, fully trusting that if the fire asks again, you will answer. For now, everything is in balance. You settle back into sleep, but the presence of animals nearby continues to shape the night even when you are no longer fully aware of it. Their warmth lingers beneath the floor and beyond the walls, rising slowly like a second quieter fire. It does not blaze or flicker. It simply exists steady and dependable. A soft sound drifts up again, a shift of weight, the gentle scrape of straw. It blends with the rhythm of your breathing until it feels almost synchronized. Livestock kept close during winter served many purposes, and warmth was only one of them. Animals needed protection from wind and snow just as much as people did, and keeping them nearby made daily care easier when storms erased paths and buried fences. You feel that practical closeness, now a shared shelter against the same weather. You remember dimly that many homesteads were planned with this arrangement in mind. Barns pressed close to cabins, lean-tos built against exterior walls, sometimes even shared roofs stretching over both human and animal space. This closeness was not accidental. It reflected a way of life where separation was a luxury rarely afforded during winter. The smell reaches you next, faint but unmistakable. Hay, leather, animal warmth. It mixes with smoke and wool, creating a layered scent that feels grounding rather than unpleasant. These smells signaled life continuing despite the storm. They marked a successful night one where everyone was still breathing, still warm enough to make it through to morning. A rarely mentioned detail appears in your half-dreams. Some families placed bedding deliberately near walls shared with animals not just for warmth but for reassurance. Hearing a cow settle or a horse snort softly provided comfort during long nights when the world outside felt erased. You understand that instinct now. Sound equals presence. Presence equals safety. You shift slightly, not waking fully, but adjusting your body to the warmth patterns you have learned. One side feels warmer than the other. You angle yourself to take advantage of it instinctively, choosing the side closest to where you know the animals rest. This movement happens without thought, guided by comfort rather than intention. The storm outside continues, but it has lost its sharpness. Snow insulates more with each passing hour. The animals respond to this too, their movements slowing, their breathing deepening. They conserve energy the same way you do, resting through the worst of it, rather than fighting what cannot be changed. There is a quiet understanding here shared across species. Stay still, stay close, let the storm spend itself. Some historians have pointed out that this closeness between people and animals blurred emotional boundaries in ways modern life rarely does. Animals were not pets in the modern sense, but they were not distant either. They were companions in survival. Whether this closeness fostered affection or simply respect varies by account, and the written record does not offer a single clear picture. Lying here, you feel something simpler: gratitude. Your breathing deepens again, slow and even. The warmth from below feels more noticeable now, rising through the floorboards in subtle waves. It does not eliminate the cold entirely, but it softens, it rounds its edges. Cold becomes a background presence rather than a threat. You drift briefly into a dream, shallow and quiet. Shapes move slowly. Sounds echo gently. When you surface again, you're still wrapped in the same layered warmth, still listening to the same steady sounds. Time feels less linear here. Moments blur together without urgency. Another sound reaches you closer this time. A quiet snort, a hoof shifting, Then silence again, nothing distressed, nothing urgent. Your body registers this and relaxes further, releasing a tension you did not realize it was holding. People who wrote about winter nights on the frontier often described animals as early warning systems. Restlessness could signal weather changes, predators, or structural trouble. Tonight the animals are calm. That calm transfers to you like a shared understanding passed silently through the dark. You tuck your chin slightly, keeping warmth close. The blanket rises and falls with your breath. The straw beneath you compresses and holds. Everything feels settled into its place. There are differing interpretations among researchers about how often animals were allowed directly beneath sleeping areas versus kept in separate but nearby structures. Regional differences, available space, and cultural habits all played roles. The details shift depending on who you read. What remains consistent is the emphasis on proximity. Distance meant exposure, closeness meant survivalness. You sense that truth in your body more than your thoughts. The night feels less lonely with other living beings sharing it. Even unseen, their presence shapes the space, fills it with warmth and quiet sound. Outside wind brushes the cabin lightly, now no longer pressing hard. Snow continues to fall, but more gently. The storm has moved past its peak, settling into a long, steady descent. Inside, warmth stabilizes further, helped by fire bodies and stillness working together. Your awareness fades again, slipping deeper this time. Thoughts dissolve into sensation, heat, breath, sound. The animals nearby fade into the background, not gone, just no longer distinct. You rest within this shared shelter, carried by a night that is no longer threatening, just long. The cabin holds everyone within it, human and animal alike, bound together by weather and necessity. As sleep finally deepens, you no longer listen for individual sounds. They blend into a single steady presence that feels almost like silence. Wrapped in layered warmth and quiet companionship, you drift onward, the storm outside continuing its work without disturbing the balance you have found. You wake again, not fully, just enough to register a change. The warmth around you feels thinner near the floor, heavier near your chest. Your feet, despite all your careful layering, have cooled more than the rest of you. Cold always finds the lowest point first. It waits there patiently, testing whether you will notice. You flex your toes inside thick socks, slow and deliberate. The movement sends a faint ache upward, followed by a gradual return of feeling. This is not pain exactly, more like a reminder. Nights like this reward attention. You learned that hours ago, and your body remembers even when your mind drifts. The floor beneath you feels solid and unyielding. Wooden planks hold the cold long after the fire has warmed the air above them. People living in frontier homesteads often spoke of cold rising from below as the most difficult thing to manage, especially during long storms when fires were kept modest to conserve fuel. You feel that challenge now, quiet but persistent. You shift slightly, drawing your feet closer toward your core. The blanket follows the movement, rustling softly. Straw compresses beneath your weight and holds its shape. The sound is brief, then gone. You pause, listening for any reaction from the cabin. Nothing changes. The night remains calm. Your awareness sharpens for a moment as you think about the floor itself. Many homestead cabins were built directly on packed earth or stone foundations with minimal separation from the ground. Insulating materials were limited, and raising floors higher required time and labor that not everyone had. That decision echoes through the night now, long after the builders are gone. A small half-remembered habit surfaces as you lie there. Some settlers spread extra straw or animal hides beneath bedding during the coldest months, replacing them often as they flattened or dampened. It was messy, imperfect, and effective enough to matter. Whether it was done everywhere or only where materials allowed is uncertain, but the idea feels logical as you press your feet together for warmth. You tuck them under your other leg, trapping heat where you can. The cold recedes slightly, not defeated, just delayed. That is often the best outcome on winter nights. Delay rather than eliminate. Manage rather than conquer. Your hands remain warm near your chest, fingers curled loosely. You resist the urge to stretch. Stretching would expose skin and invite cold back in. Instead, you remain compact, conserving what warmth you have built. This posture feels familiar now, no longer deliberate, simply the way your body rests here. The fire breathes softly across the room. You do not open your eyes to check it. The sound tells you enough. Embers still glow, heat still travels even if unevenly. You trust it for now. There has been discussion among those who study early domestic life about how much discomfort people simply accepted as normal. Modern expectations of constant warmth did not exist. Cold was a condition to work with, not something to be eliminated entirely. You feel that mindset settle into you as you stop wishing for more and focus instead on maintaining balance. The cabin creaks faintly as wind shifts outside. Snow slides from the roof in a low, brief rush, then silence returns. You tense for a heartbeat, then relax when nothing follows. These sounds no longer feel threatening. They feel routine, part of the structure adjusting to weather as it was meant to. Your breathing slows again, deep and steady. Each inhale warms the air inside your blanket. Each exhale releases it slowly. You become aware of how much your own body contributes to the warmth you feel. Fire helps, layers help, but your body does much of the work itself quietly and constantly. A thought drifts through you, uninvited but gentle. People who slept on floors for much of their lives likely developed stronger tolerance for uneven pressure and cold contact. Muscles adapted, bones adjusted. What feels uncomfortable at first becomes familiar over time. Lying here, you sense that adaptation beginning, even if only for the night. You adjust your head slightly, careful not to disturb the rest of your body. The makeshift pillow shifts under your cheek, then settles. Your neck relaxes again. It is not luxurious, but it no longer feels wrong. Wrong requires energy to resist. Acceptable allows rest. Outside, the storm continues, but it has lost its urgency. Snow falls steadily rather than violently. Wind moves without force. The world feels paused, suspended in white and dark. Inside the cabin responds with quiet steadiness. Your feet have warmed enough now that you no longer think about them. Sensation fades into comfort. Cold remains somewhere below awareness, held at bay by position and patience. You notice how your thoughts begin to loosen their grip. They no longer follow clear paths. Images appear briefly, then dissolve. A memory of light, the sound of wind, the shape of the window. None of it demands attention. There are differing interpretations among researchers about how much people worried about cold-related illness during sleep. Some accounts show deep concern, while others treat it as an accepted risk. Lying here, you sense a quiet confidence rather than fear. You're doing what can be done. The rest is out of your hands. The cabin feels settled again. Fire floor, walls and roof have all found a temporary agreement with the weather. Your body mirrors that agreement, settling into stillness without tension. You exhale slowly, letting the last bits of alertness drift away. The night stretches on, but it no longer feels heavy. It feels neutral, something to move through rather than resist. Wrapped in layers and routine, supported by wood and fire and patience, you rest. The cold remains outside the circle you have drawn with care. For now that circle holds and sleep deepens quietly around you. As the night continues, a new layer of awareness settles in, quieter than before. It is not driven by cold or sound this time, but by smell. You notice it gradually, the way scents reveal themselves when everything else slows down. Smoke lingers in the air, not thick enough to sting your eyes, just present enough to remind you where warmth comes from. The smell has depth to it, charred wood, sap, a faint sweetness from whatever tree the logs came from. It mixes with damp wool and straw, creating something uniquely of this place and this moment. You breathe it in without thinking, and your chest rises a little deeper than before. This scent signals safety. It means fire is still alive. Cabins like this one often held smoke in ways modern homes never would. Chimneys were simple, sometimes imperfect, and smoke drifted where it pleased before finding its way out. People adapted quickly, learning to read air quality by smell alone. Too sharp meant danger. Too faint meant the fire was dying. You recognize the balance now, even without standing up. Your clothing has absorbed the scent as well. It clings to fabric and hair, settling into every fold. This smell will not leave quickly. Even after the storm passes, it will follow you into the morning, into the day's work, into sleep again the next night. In many ways, it becomes a marker of winter itself, something your people associated with long nights and survival rather than inconvenience. You shift slightly and the straw beneath you releases a quiet dusty scent of its own. Dry, earthy, familiar. Straw mattresses needed frequent refreshings, especially in damp conditions, and families kept an eye on smell as much as feel. A sour note meant moisture. Moisture meant cold and illness. You inhale again, reassured by the clean, dry scent beneath you. A lesser-known habit surfaces as you rest. Some homesteads hung small bundles of dried herbs near sleeping areas, not just for comfort, but because they believed certain scents kept illness away during winter. Whether these bundles had any real effect is unclear, but the belief itself shaped how people experienced the night. Smell was part of protection, not just atmosphere. The air feels heavier, near the ceiling warmer, and thick with smoke, while cooler air rests closer to the floor. This layering is subtle but noticeable. People learn to live within it, sleeping low, sitting high, moving carefully to avoid stirring cold air upward. You stay still now, letting the layers remain undisturbed. Your breathing remains slow and steady. Each inhale pulls warmth and scent inward. Each exhale releases it gently back into the space. The air feels shared, recycled between fire cabin and body. Nothing is wasted. Everything circulates. There is some uncertainty in historical accounts about how much smoke exposure people tolerated during winter. Some descriptions suggest thick eye-watering conditions, while others imply careful management and ventilation. The truth likely shifted from cabin to cabin, night to night. Here the balance feels workable, not pleasant, but acceptable. You become aware of how smell shapes memory even as sleep approaches. The scent of smoke will likely weave itself into dreams, becoming part of whatever images form behind closed eyes. Snow may fall there too. Fire may glow. The senses do not shut off completely. They simply soften. Outside, the storm remains present but muted. Snow continues to fall, but sound is swallowed by its own accumulation. Inside, scent takes over where sound fades. It becomes the dominant reminder that you're still awake, still breathing, still sheltered. You tuck your chin, slightly pulling fabric closer around your face. The smell intensifies briefly, then settles again. It feels grounding rather than overwhelming. Your shoulders drop another fraction, tension draining slowly away. People who spent winters like this often spoke of knowing when morning was nearby. Subtle changes in air and scent. A shift in smoke movement. A cooling or warming that did not come from fire. You're not there yet. The night still holds firmly, but the idea floats by distant and unimportant for now. Your thoughts grow less defined, drifting in slow loops rather than straight lines. Smell blends with sensation. Warmth blends with weight. Time loosens its grip. The fire crackles softly, sending out another breath of smoke and heat. You accept it without reaction, trusting the balance you have built. There is nothing more to adjust, nothing more to check. Wrapped in layered air and familiar scent, you rest deeper now. The cabin holds the smoke holds the warmth holds you. As sleep settles further, the edges of awareness blur. Smell fades into background presence, no longer distinct, just part of the night's fabric. You drift quietly, carried by breath and warmth, and their steady understanding that for this moment everything continues as it should. Your mind wanders now, not in sharp thoughts, but in slow recollections that feel borrowed rather than owned. Stories surface the way they always do at night, gently and without invitation. These are not the loud tales told by firelight to pass time. They are the quieter ones, half-remembered, shaped by repetition and long winters. You recall how people once filled nights like this with stories not because they were bored, but because silence could feel too wide. Frontier families passed down accounts of storms that lasted days, of cabins nearly buried, of mornings when doors had to be dug out rather than opened. These stories were not meant to frighten. They were meant to remind listeners that endurance was possible, that others had made it through nights just like this one. Lying here, you understand why stories mattered. They gave shape to fear without feeding it. They turned isolation into continuity. Someone else had heard this wind before. Someone else had listened to snow scrape along logs and wondered if the roof would hold. Knowing that made the night feel less personal, less heavy. A detail drifts in that rarely makes it into official records. Some families repeated the same winter stories every year, almost word for word, as if consistency itself offered comfort. Children learned them before they fully understood them. Adults listened even when they knew the ending. The repetition was the point. Familiar words anchored unfamiliar nights. Your thoughts slow as one such story passes through you. A cabin standing firm while snow piled higher than windows. A fire kept alive with careful hands. A morning that arrived quietly after long darkness. The details blur, but the shape remains. Survival followed by relief. There is no clear agreement among historians about how much these stories were embellished over time. Some were likely exaggerated, others understated. Memory reshapes experience, smoothing sharp edges or sharpening dull ones. What matters here is not accuracy but effect. Stories helped people rest when rest was difficult. You shift slightly, adjusting your blanket as a small draft moves through the cabin. The movement reminds you that this is not just a remembered night. It is happening now. The storm outside is real. The cold is real. The fire still works quietly on your behalf. The stories fade into sensation again. You feel the weight of the blanket, the firmness beneath you, the gentle warmth near your chest. Your breathing deepens, further steady and unhurried. Thoughts no longer form complete sentences. They arrive as impressions instead. Somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, you imagine voices carried by wind, not speaking clearly, just murmuring. Not ghosts, just echoes of people who once listened to storms the same way you do now. This feeling does not unsettle you. It feels companionable, as if the night is crowded with quiet witnesses. You become aware of how storytelling shapes sleep itself. Nights were not meant to be empty. Even when no one spoke aloud, the mind filled the space with familiar narratives. That habit persists even now, even when you lie alone. Your jaw relaxes, your tongue rests heavy behind your teeth, muscles in your face soften in ways you rarely notice during the day. The body prepares itself for deeper rest without asking permission. Outside, snow continues to fall, but its presence feels abstract now. It no longer presses on your thoughts. It simply exists, like the stories did, like the people before you did, like you do now. There are accounts suggesting that winter storytelling often happened earlier in the evening, before sleep claimed everyone fully. Other descriptions hint at murmured exchanges even late into the night. The truth likely shifted depending on fatigue, fear, and weather. Tonight the stories live only inside you, and that feels enough. Your thoughts begin to fragment, images overlapping without logic. Firelight becomes snowlight. Wind becomes breath. A voice becomes your own. You do not resist this blending. Resistance would only pull you back toward wakefulness. You rest deeper, now carried by the sense that this night is not unique, no matter how personal it feels. Countless others have lain awake during storms, listening, adjusting, waiting. That shared experience stretches quietly across time, linking you to them without effort. As sleep settles more firmly, the stories lose their edges. They dissolve into warmth and darkness, leaving behind only the calm assurance they were meant to give. You drift further inward, wrapped in quiet, in repetition, in the steady rhythm of survival turned into rest. Darkness deepens in a way that feels complete rather than advancing. You notice it not by sight, but by how little there is left to notice. The firelight no longer reaches the corners of the cabin. It pulls near the hearth and fades gently, leaving the rest of the room to exist without definition. Shapes soften, edges dissolve. What remains is presence rather than detail. You open your eyes briefly and then close them again, realizing how little difference it makes. Night here is not pierced by the distant streetlights or glowing screens. Once the flame dims, the dark settles fully like snow filling a hollow. People who lived this way grew accustomed to a darkness that did not pretend to be anything else. It asked no interpretation, it simply was. You feel it around you now, thick and calm, not threatening, just absolute. Your senses adjust quickly, turning inward when outward vision offers nothing. You listen instead. You feel, you breathe. Your hand brushes the blanket as you shift slightly, confirming its position. Texture replaces sight. Wool feels coarse but reliable beneath your fingers. The straw beneath your body gives a familiar firmness, grounding you in place. You know where you are without seeing it. That knowledge settles you further. Long winter nights trained people to trust their environment through touch and sound rather than sight. You sense that skill emerging quietly now. You know where the door is, where the hearth rests, where the window waits with snow pressed against it. The room exists in your mind even when your eyes offer no help. A faint glow pulses behind your eyelids as the fire breathes. It is not light so much as suggestion, enough to remind you that warmth still lives nearby. You do not need to look. Looking would cost effort. Feeling is enough. The darkness carries sound differently. Each noise feels closer, more intimate. A soft creak from the wall feels like it happens beside you rather than across the room. A small shift of straw sounds louder than it did earlier. You accept this without alarm. The cabin has simply entered its night voice. There are old mentions of people arranging sleeping spaces carefully so they could navigate in total darkness without stumbling. Memory replaced sight, counted steps, familiar layouts. You lie still now, but you can imagine rising and moving through the room with care if needed, guided by habit rather than vision. Your breathing slows further, and with it your thoughts begin to thin. Darkness makes thinking quieter. Without visual distraction, ideas arrive more slowly, then drift away before fully forming. You let this happen, allowing the dark to do its quiet work. Outside, the storm continues, but you no longer picture it clearly. Snow and wind exist as concepts rather than images. The night has narrowed your focus inward toward warmth and rest. Your eyelids feel heavy now, not with strain but with release. Muscles around your eyes soften completely. The small tension you carry there during the day fades without ceremony. Your jaw loosens, your tongue rests still. Somewhere in the cabin wood contracts softly as temperatures shift. The sound is brief and familiar. You recognize it without thinking and let it pass without response. Recognition without reaction becomes the rule now. The darkness feels protective in an unexpected way. Without sight, there is less to evaluate, less to judge. You do not scan for problems. You trust that if something changes, you will hear it. Until then, the night holds steady. You become aware of how little effort it takes to remain still now. Earlier stillness required intention. Now it happens naturally. Your body has found its position and sees no reason to argue with it. The fire releases another gentle breath of warmth, subtle but present. You feel it brush one side of your body, then fade. It is enough to reassure without waking you further. Your thoughts drift into fragments again. Not stories this time, just sensations. Dark, warm, quiet, safe. Each one floats by without attaching to the next. You rest within the darkness rather than against it. It does not press on you. It wraps around you, softening the edges of awareness. Time stretches but loses meaning. Minutes and hours blur together into a single continuous night. As sleep deepens, even the idea of darkness fades. It becomes simply the absence of interruption. Nothing pulls at your attention, nothing demands action. You drift further inward, carried by the calm certainty that the cabin still stands. The fire still breathes and the storm continues without asking anything of you. Wrapped in darkness and warmth, you sink into rest, letting the night hold you without resistance. A faint draft finds you before any sound does. It brushes across your cheek, light enough to question whether it is real, cool enough to confirm that it is. You do not open your eyes. You do not move right away. Instead, you notice. Drafts on nights like this are messages, not threats. They tell you how the cabin is breathing. The air moves slowly through unseen gaps, slipping between logs where wood has shrunk just enough to allow it. This is not a failure of construction. It is simply how natural materials behave when heat and cold trade places for hours at a time. Cabins built from fresh timber changed constantly, tightening and loosening as the weather demanded. You feel that quiet adjustment now, the structure responding rather than resisting. You pull the blanket a fraction higher, just enough to shield your face without trapping your breath. The fabric shifts softly, then stills. Warm air gathers again, and the cool touch fades to the edge of awareness. This small correction feels practiced, almost automatic. People who slept through winters like this learn to respond without fully waking, conserving energy even in their adjustments. Your nose catches the faintest scent of cold air. It smells different from the air warmed by fire. Sharper, cleaner. It carries the outside with its snow and distance and open space. The contrast is subtle but clear. Inside air feels lived in. Outside air feels untouched. You imagine how settlers once searched for drafts by candle flame, watching it flicker near walls and seams. When they found a leak, they stuffed it with cloth moss or whatever could slow the cold. Even so, some drafts always remained. Complete sealing was rare. Nights were spent managing air rather than eliminating it. You shift your head slightly, turning your cheek away from where the cool air brushes past. The pillow responds with a quiet rustle. The draft still both exists, but it no longer reaches sensitive skin. This is enough. You do not chase perfection. You accept improvement. The cabin makes a soft sound as wind shifts direction outside. A low groan travels through the logs, then fades. Snow presses harder against one wall, now easing pressure on another. The airflow changes with it, redirecting itself through new paths. You sense this without calculation, like feeling weather in your joints. Your breathing stays slow and even. Inhale brings warmth. Exhale releases it gently back into the space. The draft no longer disrupts that rhythm, it simply moves around it. Some winter accounts mention how people judged weather changes by drafts alone, knowing when wind shifted long before dawn revealed it. Lying here, you feel that awareness settle into you. The cabin speaks through air and sound, and you are learning to listen. You tuck your hands closer beneath the blanket, fingers warming Goan. The rest of your body remains still. Movement is minimal now, reserved only for what matters. Everything else waits. Outside, the storm continues its slow work. Snow piles higher. Wind searches for openings and finds fewer than before. Inside, the cabin holds imperfect but sufficient. Your thoughts drift again, slow and shapeless. The draft becomes part of the background, no longer distinct enough to hold attention. It joins the fire's breath, the settling wood, the quiet weight of night. You feel how stillness deepens when nothing changes for a while. The body relaxes further, trusting that it will be alerted if needed. Until then, rest takes precedence. The cool air brushes past, once more lighter, now almost gone. Snow has likely sealed another gap outside, shifting the cabin's breathing again. You notice this and then let it go. Wrapped in warmth and quiet adjustments, you drift deeper into sleep. The cabin continues to flex and breathe around you, and you move with it rather than against it. For now, the balance holds. The night remains long, but it no longer feels demanding. You rest within it, listening without effort, responding only when necessary. Sleep gathers you, again gentle and steady as the storm and cabin settle into their shared rhythm. The storm feels different now, not quieter exactly, but more settled, as if it has found the shape it intends to keep for the rest of the night. You sense this without opening your eyes. The wind no longer tests the cabin with sharp gusts. It moves steadily, passing over and around you like water flowing past a stone. Snow presses in from every side, and instead of feeling threatening, it feels strangely supportive. The weight of it dampens sound, sealing the cabin inside a pocket of calm. You notice how much less you hear now compared to earlier. Fewer sudden shifts, fewer surprises. The storm has stopped arguing with the land and has decided to stay. You breathe slowly, letting this realization settle. There is relief in knowing that what you are facing has stabilized. Uncertainty drains more energy than hardship itself, and now the night feels predictable even if it remains long. Your body responds to this change almost immediately. Muscles that were still holding a trace of readiness finally let go. Your shoulders sink deeper into the bedding. Your legs relax into their bent position. The floor beneath you feels less intrusive, not because it has warmed, but because your body has stopped bracing against it. Snow acts like insulation in ways that are easy to forget. As it builds up against the walls, it fills gaps and softens temperature swings. People who live through winters like this learn to notice when heavy snowfall actually made cabins warmer inside, at least for a while. You feel that subtle shift now. The cold has not vanished, but it feels steadier, less sharp. Your breath fogs faintly in the cooler air near your face, then disappears again. You watch it once, then let your attention drift inward. Breath has become something you observe rather than control. It rises and falls on its own schedule, slow and reliable. The cabin seems to have accepted the storm as well. Creaks and pops grow less frequent. Wood settles into its contracted shape and stays there. The roof holds its burden without complaint. Nothing sounds strained. Everything feels balanced. There are moments when danger and safety exist side by side, separated only by preparation and timing. You sense that this is one of those moments. The storm outside could be deadly to anyone caught in it unprotected. Inside these walls, wrapped in layers and routine, it becomes something you can live alongside. You turn this idea over slowly without urgency. It feels important but not alarming. The storm is both threat and shield. It blocks travel. It isolates. But it also buries scents, muffles sound, and discourages anything else from moving in the night. You are hidden as much as you are confined. Your thoughts wander briefly to how still the world must be beyond the cabin now. Fields erased, paths gone, landmarks swallowed by white. Anyone outside would struggle to orient themselves. Inside you are oriented by touch, sound, and memory instead. You adjust the blanket slightly at your shoulders, not because you're cold, but because it feels right. The fabric settles and stays. You do not need to move again. Sleep pulls closer, heavier now, but still gentle. It no longer hovers at the edge of awareness. It settles into you, pressing softly, inviting you to let go of the last bits of attention you're holding. You let your jaw relax fully. Teeth part slightly, the muscles in your face smooth out. These small releases ripple downward through your body, loosening everything they touch. Outside, snow continues to fall, but it no longer announces itself. It simply accumulates. The world is being reshaped quietly without drama. Inside, warmth holds steady. Fire bodies and snow have reached a temporary agreement. None of them push too hard. None of them retreat entirely. Balance persists. You realize that this balance is what people depended on through winters like this. Not comfort, not certainty. Just enough warmth, enough shelter, enough routine to make waiting possible. Waiting becomes easier when nothing changes. Your thoughts thin further, stretching out and dissolving before they can become complete ideas. Images fade into sensation. Sensation fades into stillness. You drift deeper now, carried by the sense that the hardest part of the night has passed. The storm has shown its hand. The cabin has answered. Your body has adjusted. Sleep no longer feels like something you are approaching. It feels like something you're already inside, sinking further with every slow breath. The world outside can do what it wants. Snow can fall, wind can move. You are held in place by walls, by warmth, by the simple fact of being prepared enough. As rest deepens, the distinction between you and the night softens. You are no longer listening for change. You are no longer measuring warmth. You are simply resting within the conditions as they are. The storm continues steady and indifferent. Inside you sleep more deeply now, supported by snow that threatens and protects at the same time. You let yourself sink fully into that understanding, and the night carries you onward without resistance. The night reaches a point where even time seems to slow. You notice it not by any signal, but by the absence of urgency. Nothing needs adjusting. Nothing asks for your attention. The cabin feels settled in a deeper way now, as if it has leaned back into the storm and decided to rest alongside you. Your body follows suit. The small aches you noticed earlier have softened into background sensations present, but no longer sharp. Muscles lie heavy against straw and fabric, content to stay where they are. You feel the weight of yourself more than the shape of the bed beneath you, a gentle pressure that keeps you anchored. Breath moves steadily in and out warm air, briefly filling the space beneath your blanket before drifting away again. Each cycle feels complete on its own. There is no need to hurry to the next one. Your chest rises, your chest falls, the rhythm repeats without effort. Somewhere deep in this cabin, wood settles again, a sound so quiet it barely registers. It does not pull you toward wakefulness. It simply passes through awareness like a ripple across still water. You recognize it and let it go. The storm outside has become part of the background of existence rather than an event. Snow continues to fall, but you no longer picture it clearly. Wind moves, but without sharp edges. Everything beyond the walls feels distant and abstract, like a thought you decided not to finish. You sense the fire without hearing it clearly now. Its presence shows up as warmth rather than sound. A subtle glow touches one side of your body, then fades. It is enough to reassure without asking for attention. The fire has become dependable, which is the highest compliment it can earn tonight. Your hands rest loosely near your chest. Fingers are warm, relaxed, no longer curled defensively. The urge to move has faded almost entirely. Stillness feels natural rather than imposed. You belong in this position now. The cabin smells faintly of smoke and dry wood, but even scent has softened. It no longer arrives in distinct notes. It blends into the air itself, becoming part of what breathing feels like rather than something you notice separately. You realize that the night has shifted from something you're experiencing to something you're inside. Earlier you listened to it, you adjusted to it, now it holds you without effort. This is the point where frontier nights likely deepened into true rest, not because conditions improved, but because bodies and minds finally aligned with them. Resistance faded. Expectation faded. What remained was simply the act of being warm enough, sheltered enough, and still enough. Your thoughts drift lazily, but they no longer form images or stories. They arrive as fragments and dissolve before taking shape, a sense of space, a hint of light, the feeling of being covered. Each one passes without leaving a trace. The boundary between waking and sleeping grows thinner. You're aware of yourself resting, but you're not actively maintaining that awareness. It floats on its own light and unforced. The anew slides somewhere outside, a soft rush followed by silence. You register it dimly, more as a change in texture than a sound. The roof holds, the walls remain steady. There is nothing to do with this information, so it slips away. Your breathing slows further, deepening just a little more. Each exhale releases warmth and tension together. Each inhale brings calm rather than alertness. The cycle feels nourishing rather than functional. You feel the weight of the blanket settle more fully, as if gravity has increased slightly. This sensation is comforting, a gentle pressure that encourages deeper rest. It reminds you that you are contained, held in place by layers and walls and snow. The world has narrowed to what exists inside the cabin. Fire, wood, fabric, breath. Everything else has receded beyond relevance. Morning exists somewhere far away, but it does not belong to this moment. You sink deeper into the bedding without moving. Straw compresses imperceptibly, finding a final shape beneath you. The floor beneath remains firm, but it no longer feels cold. Or perhaps you've simply stopped noticing it. Your jaw hangs loose, now mouth slightly open. Breath flows easily. The muscles of your face have given up their last bits of tension. Forehead smooth, eyes heavy and still beneath closed lids. The night feels long, but it also feels kind. It asks nothing from you now. It no longer tests preparation or patience. It simply continues. You rest within that continuation, drifting lower and slower with each passing breath. Awareness fades not all at once, but in layers like snow filling a hollow space. The cabin remains, the storm remains, the fire remains. All of them carry on without requiring your attention. You let go completely, allowing sleep to deepen on its own terms, supported by the quiet agreement between shelter, warmth, and time. You drift somewhere beneath full awareness now, but the storm still shapes your rest in quiet ways. Even in deeper sleep, your body listens. It notices changes before your thoughts ever do. A subtle shift in temperature brushes across your skin, not enough to wake you, just enough to be registered and folded into whatever dream is forming. Your breathing adjusts in response, slow and instinctive. Inhale draws warmth inward. Exhale releases it carefully. The rhythm remains steady, guided more by habit than thought. This is the kind of sleep that carries awareness inside it, not light enough to be fragile, not deep enough to be unreachable. Images begin to appear loose and unstructured. Snowfields without edges, firelight without walls. You move through these scenes without effort, carried rather than directed. Sounds from the cabin slip into them quietly. A crackle becomes distant thunder. Wind becomes the sound of something passing overhead. Your mind reshapes reality gently, without urgency. The cabin creaks once at the low sound that travels through the structure and fades. You do not wake. Your body registers familiarity rather than threat. It has learned the difference between danger and ordinary movement. That learning shows itself now as uninterrupted rest. Your hand twitches beneath the blanket, fingers curling briefly before relaxing again. The movement is small and unconscious, a sign of warmth redistributing rather than discomfort. You remain curled inward, conserving heat even in sleep. Sug continues to fall outside, but the weight of it no longer presses into awareness. It exists as a presence rather than an event. The storm has become background, like the steady rush of water in a river you no longer need to watch. There are moments in long winter nights when sleep feels layered with shallow dreams floating above deeper rest. You move between these layers now without noticing the transitions. One moment holds images, the next holds only sensation, then nothing at all. Your body remains still, heavy and settled. The blanket has not shifted. The air beneath it stays warm and contained. No draft reaches you now. Snow has sealed the cabin further, smoothing the flow of air until it barely moves. Firelight pulses faintly behind closed eyes, is not as light but as warmth. It touches your side, retreats, then returns. You respond by drawing your knees a fraction closer without waking. The adjustment happens entirely below thought. Your face remains relaxed, jaw loose, lips parted slightly. Breath moves freely. Muscles that once held readiness have let go completely. The night no longer requires vigilance. A sound arrives from outside, distant and muffled. Perhaps snow sliding from a branch or roof edge. It blends into the rhythm of sleep without pulling you upward. The world continues to change quietly around you while you remain at rest. Dreams soften, again becoming less visual, more atmospheric. A sense of shelter, a feeling of being enclosed. Warmth, without source. These impressions linger briefly, then dissolve. Your heartbeat slows further, steady and unremarkable. The body has entered its most economical state, conserving energy and repairing itself without instruction. This rest feels earned, not accidental. The cabin holds its shape through the night. Wood remains tight, roof remains steady. Fire continues its quiet work. None of it intrudes on your sleep. All of it supports it. Time stretches and compresses in unfamiliar ways. Minutes disappear. Hours pass without being counted. The night exists as a single continuous soul rather than a series of moments. You sink deeper, still crossing a threshold where even fragments of awareness fade. Sensation softens to the point of absence. Thought dissolves entirely. Outside, the storm continues its long descent, reshaping the land silently. Inside, you sleep fully held by the shelter you prepared and the quiet agreements that keep it standing. The night carries on, and you remain within it, resting without effort, untouched by anything that does not need you. You surface briefly from deeper sleep, not into full wakefulness, but into a quiet awareness that feels almost weightless. Nothing pulls you up sharply. Instead, you float nearer the edge, aware that you exist, aware that you are warm enough, and aware that the night is still very much present. Silence has changed its character. Earlier it felt active, filled with listening and evaluation. Now it feels complete, rounded, as if nothing is missing from it. Even the storm seems quieter, not because it's ended, but because it has settled into a long, steady patience. Snow falls with no urgency. Wind moves without insistence. Your body remains still, heavy and relaxed. There is no impulse to turn or adjust. Whatever position you found earlier continues to work. Warmth is evenly distributed now, not perfect but stable. Stability is what matters. The body recognizes this and lets go further. Breath moves in deep, unhurried cycles. Each inhale feels cool at first, then warms as it travels inward. Each exhale drifts out slowly, carrying softness with it. You do not guide this process. It unfolds on its own, practiced and reliable. Somewhere in the cabin, the fire releases a small sound, not a crack or pop, but a gentle settling like embers shifting closer together. You sense the warmth shift slightly in response. The change is subtle, but your body notices and accepts it without waking further. Your thoughts do not form sentences now. They arrive as feelings, a sense of enclosure, a sense of quiet endurance. The idea of morning exists faintly, but it carries no urgency. It belongs to another time, not this one. You feel the weight of the blanket pressing evenly across your body. It anchors you in place, a gentle reminder that you are covered, protected, and not required to move. The pressure feels comforting rather than restrictive, encouraging deeper rest. Outside, snow continues to collect against the cabin, thickening the world beyond recognition. Inside, the air feels still and layered, no longer shifting in noticeable currents. The cabin has found its balance with the weather, and that balance transfers to you. You notice how little effort it takes to remain asleep now. Earlier rest required cooperation. Now it simply continues. Awareness drifts in and out without disturbing anything. You're not guarding sleep anymore. You're inside it. A distant sound reaches you, faintly softened beyond clarity. It could be snow sliding. It could be wind brushing past something buried. Your mind does not attempt to identify it. Identification is unnecessary. The sound carries no instruction. Your muscles feel loose and heavy, as if gravity has increased just slightly. Limbs sink into their resting places without resistance. Even the small muscles around your eyes and mouth have gone slack, releasing expressions you did not know you were holding. The cabin exists around you without demanding attention. Walls stand, roof bears weight, floor remains firm. These facts are not considered. They are simply assumed now, folded into the trust you have built throughout the night. Time loses definition entirely. The night is no longer divided into parts. It stretches as one long unbroken state. You do not move through it, you rest within it. Your breathing deepens once more, then steadies. The rhythm is slow, almost meditative, though you're not trying to meditate. Rest has taken over the work lightly. The storm outside continues to spend itself grain by grain, layer by layer. Inside you remain untouched by its effort, held in a pocket of warmth and stillness. You drift deeper again, awareness thinning to almost nothing. The idea of yourself fades gently, replaced by sensation that soon fades as well. The cabin holds, the night holds, sleep holds you without effort. You come back to yourself slowly, the way a surface appears beneath thinning fog. There is no clear reason for it. No sound calls you. No discomfort presses hard enough to insist. Awareness simply returns, gentle and brief, like a ripple that forms and fades on its own. The cabin feels unchanged. That realization comes first, calm and reassuring. The air is still warm enough. The blanket still rests where it should. The quiet remains intact. Whatever woke you has already lost interest. You lie without moving, letting your senses check in one by one. Touch comes first, the steady pressure beneath you, the weight across your shoulders, the familiar firmness that no longer feels foreign. Then temperature, cool at the edges, warm at the center, balanced, acceptable. Sound follows last. Not silence exactly, but something close to it. A low, distant presence that tells you the world is still there without asking you to engage. You listen briefly, then stop listening. The habit has softened. Vigilance is no longer required. Your breathing remains deep and unhurried. Each breath seems to fill more space than before, spreading warmth and ease through your chest and down into your stomach. The body has shifted fully into its nighttime economy, spending as little energy as possible while quietly repairing itself. You notice how little effort it takes now to stay still. Earlier in the night, stillness had to be chosen. Muscles had to be convinced. Now it happens naturally. Movement feels unnecessary, almost intrusive. You remain where you are because there is no reason not to. The fire continues its quiet work across the room. You do not hear it clearly anymore. Its presence arrives as a subtle warmth that drifts and fades, then returns again. The pattern is familiar enough that it no longer registers as change. It is simply part of the room's rhythm. Your thoughts drift briefly, but they do not form images or narratives. They pass like clouds without shape, a sense of depth, a hint of light, the idea of morning distant and vague. None of it stays long enough to matter. Outside, the storm has entered a slower phase. You do not know this because you can see it, but because the cabin feels settled in a deeper way. Pressure against the walls feels constant rather than shifting. Sound remains muted and even. Snow is likely piled high enough to smooth the wind's movement into something steady. Your body responds to this steadiness with further release. The last traces of readiness dissolve. Shoulders sink, legs rest heavier, hands lie open rather than curled. You're no longer prepared to move quickly, and that feels appropriate. Time stretches again, losing definition. You're not sure how long you remain in this half-aware state. It could be moments or much longer. The distinction no longer matters, nothing depends on it. A faint sound arrives from outside, softened beyond clarity. It could be snow settling, it could be a branch giving way under weight. You acknowledge it without naming it, then let it pass. The sound carries no instruction. It asks nothing of you. The cabin remains steady through it all. Walls hold, roof bears its burden without complaint. Floor stays firm beneath you. These facts exist as quiet assumptions rather than thoughts. You trust them now in the way you trust gravity. Your breathing deepens again, slower than before. Each inhale feels spacious. Each exhale feels complete. The rhythm carries you gently downward, away from the edge of awareness. You sense how sleep has layers and how you're moving between them without resistance. One moment you are aware of warmth and sound. The next, you are not aware of anything at all. Then awareness returns briefly, only to fade again. The blanket shifts almost imperceptibly as your body relaxes further. Fabric settles into new folds, then stills. The change is small, but it feels final, as if everything has found its place. Your jaw loosens again. The muscles of your face soften completely. There is no expression left to hold, no reaction waiting to happen. Even the idea of effort feels distant. The night outside continues to exist on its own terms. Snow falls, wind moves. The world reshapes itself quietly without asking for witness. Inside you remain sheltered from all of it, held in a pocket of warmth and stillness that feels earned rather than accidental. You drift deeper once more, awareness thinning, until it feels almost translucent. Sensation fades at the edges. Thought dissolves entirely. What remains is rest without content. The cabin does not intrude. The storm does not intrude. Time does not intrude. Everything agrees to let you go further. You sink fully back into sleep, supported by the quiet understanding that nothing needs your attention right now and nothing will for some time. You do not wake so much as surface gently, like drifting closer to the top of deep water without breaking through. Awareness returns in pieces rather than all at once. First comes the sense of space around you, then warmth, then the quiet certainty that you are still exactly where you should be. Time feels strange here. It does not move forward so much as hover. You could not say how long you have been asleep, or how long the night has left. The cabin does not offer clues, and your body does not ask for them. The dark remains complete. The world feels paused. Your breathing remains slow and even, settling into a rhythm that feels older than thought. Each inhale stretches gently through your chest. Each exhale softens everything it touches. You're not trying to sleep anymore. Sleep has already claimed you and is simply carrying you along. The fire across the room gives off a warmth that reaches you in faint waves. It does not arrive consistently. It drifts, fades, then returns. You feel it brush one side of your body, then move away again. The pattern is familiar enough that it no longer registers as change. You notice that your body no longer checks itself for cold. Earlier you were aware of hand-feet edges. Now, warmth exists as a general condition rather than something that must be maintained moment by moment. This shift feels important, though you do not linger on it. The cabin feels quiet in a deeper sense, not just free of sound, but free of tension. Wood no longer creaks with adjustment. Air no longer shifts noticeably. Even the storm outside seems to have settled into a steady presence that does not demand acknowledgement. You remain curled slightly inward, not from cold, but because the position feels right. It keeps everything close. It reduces space your body would otherwise have to manage. Stillness feels efficient and natural. Your thoughts do not form images now, they move as impressions, a sense of weight, a sense of enclosure, a feeling of being held in place by layers and walls and night. Each impression appears briefly, then dissolves before it can become anything else. You become aware of how little effort it takes to stay asleep at this point. Earlier rest required cooperation. Now it continues on its own. Awareness floats near the surface but does not break through unless invited, and nothing invites it. Outside, the storm continues its slow work, though you no longer sense its motion clearly. Snow has likely reached a depth that smooths everything, softening wind and muting sound. The world beyond the cabin feels distant and abstract, like something that exists without you. Your heartbeat remains steady and unremarkable. It no longer draws attention. It simply does what it does quietly and reliably. The body is busy in ways you do not need to monitor. You shift slightly, a small movement of your shoulder or hip, then settle again immediately. The movement feels automatic rather than intentional. Fabric adjusts, straw compresses, everything returns to stillness without interruption. The darkness around you feels dense but calm. It does not press inward. It holds space gently, allowing rest to deepen without effort. Your eyelids remain heavy and unmoving eyes resting comfortably behind them. You sense that the night has entered a long middle stretch where nothing changes quickly and nothing needs to. This is the kind of time that allows true rest, where the body can drift without interruption. Your breathing deepens once more, slower than before, as if each breath has decided to take its time. The rhythm becomes almost hypnotic, not because you focus on it, but because it carries you effortlessly. The cabin remains steady. The fire remains present. The storm remains outside. All of it continues without asking for anything from you. You sink further into sleep, letting awareness thin until it barely exists. Sensation fades. Thought dissolves. What remains is rest in its simplest form, quiet and uninterrupted. The night stretches on, but you no longer move through it consciously. You are carried instead, suspended in warmth and darkness, held by shelter and routine and time itself. At some point, a sound reaches you that is different enough to touch the edge of awareness. It does not jolt you awake. It does not even form clearly. It arrives as a low pressure, a sense of weight shifting somewhere above, followed by a soft spreading hush. Snow has gathered on the roof for hours now. You feel it more than you hear it. The cabin seems to press downward just slightly, not in strain but in acknowledgement. Wood accepts the burden the way it was shaped to do. Beams settle into their purpose, nothing cracks, nothing complains. You remain still, letting the moment pass through you without reaction. The sound fades as quickly as it arrived, replaced by the same deep quiet that has held most of the night. Whatever shifted above has found a new resting place, and the cabin has adjusted. Your breathing never changes pace. That feels important. The body has learned which sounds matter and which do not. This one does not. It carries no urgency, no instruction. It simply marks the passage of time in a night that has very little else to mark it. Warmth remains steady around your core. The blanket rests where it should, heavy and familiar. The air beneath it feels soft, reused, shaped by hours of breath and stillness. You notice this briefly, then stop noticing altogether. Your legs feel distant now, not numb, just far away. Sensation has narrowed to a smaller circle centered in your chest and shoulders. Everything else exists without demanding attention. This narrowing feels peaceful rather than limiting. The roof holds its shape. You know this without checking. Trust has replaced observation. Earlier in the night you listened for every change. Now you allow the structure to do its work without supervision. Another small sound follows, fainter than the first. Snow slipping, weight redistributing, then nothing. The silence that returns feels thicker than before, as if the world has tucked itself in a little tighter. Your mind drifts briefly, forming the faint impression of shelter as something active rather than passive. Not just walls and beams, but a system that responds, adjusts, and holds. The thought does not linger long enough to become an idea. It dissolves back into sensation. You sink deeper again, awareness thinning without resistance. Sleep does not pull you downward. It allows you to fall gently, layer by layer. The fire across the room continues its quiet presence. You do not sense flame or sound now, only the absence of cold that would exist without it. That absence feels like warmth. Your hands remain loose, palms open. Fingers do not curl. The body no longer guards itself. It trusts the conditions it has found. Outside, snow continues to fall, reshaping the roofline and the land beyond. Inside, nothing changes. The contrast feels reassuring. Change happens where it belongs. Stillness remains where it is needed. Your heartbeat slows further, steady and even. It no longer draws attention. It becomes part of the background rhythm of the night, indistinguishable from breath and warmth. You drift through another layer of sleep, deeper than before. Thoughts no longer form. Images no longer appear. Awareness becomes something distant and optional. The cabin remains steady, the roof remains strong, the weight above is held without effort. You rest beneath it all, unmoving, unbothered, carried forward by the quiet agreement between wood, snow and time. Sleep continues uninterrupted as the night settles fully into its long, patient middle. The night loosens its grip on you in small, almost polite ways. You are not waking, you are simply becoming available again. Awareness drifts closer, pauses, then settles back like someone checking whether a door is unlocked without intending to open it. Your body feels different now, not lighter, not heavier, just more settled. The earlier effort of staying warm has faded into something automatic. Heat no longer feels earnest moment by moment, it feels maintained. That shift carries a quiet confidence with it, the sense that whatever balance was needed has already been found. You notice your breathing first. It has slowed to a pace that feels deliberate, even though you are not guiding it. Each inhale fills your chest, gently, without urgency. Each exhale releases warmth and weight together. The space beneath the blanket feels stable, familiar, shaped by hours of stillness. The cabin around you exists without detail. You do not picture the walls, or the roof, or the door. You sense them instead as boundaries that do not need attention. Their presence is assumed the way the ground is assumed when you stand without looking down. A faint sound reaches you, and then fades before you can identify it. It does not matter what it was. Your body does not react. There is a growing trust now, not conscious but deep, that anything important would arrive differently. You lie exactly as you are, limbs resting where they have settled. The idea of movement feels unnecessary, almost distracting. There is no reason to adjust, no signal to respond to. Stillness feels complete rather than imposed. Your thoughts hover briefly, then soften. They do not turn into images or memories. They remain as sensations instead. Warmth gathered at your center, weight of fabric, the quiet pressure of the night holding everything in place. Outside, the storm continues in its own slow way, but you no longer feel connected to its motion. It exists beyond the cabin, beyond relevance. Snow can fall, wind can move, none of it reaches you here. The fire across the room continues to do what it has been doing all night. You do not sense it as sound or sight. You sense it as the absence of cold where cold would otherwise be. That absence is enough. Your heartbeat remains steady, unremarkable. It does not draw attention. It does not need reassurance. It simply continues, another quiet system working in the background while you rest. Time stretches again, becoming less of a sequence and more of a condition. You're not waiting for anything. You're not counting. The night feels like a wide, still space you're moving through without effort. A small shift happens inside you, subtle but noticeable. The line between being asleep and being aware grows thinner, then softer. You're present, but only lightly. You could slip back into deeper rest without resistance. The blanket presses evenly across your body. Its weight feels familiar now, no longer something you notice, just something that exists. Fabric rests against skin. Heat circulates quietly. Nothing pulls or tugs at your attention. Your face remains relaxed, features don't slack in a way that only happens when nothing is being held back. Jaw loose, brow smooth, eyes resting heavily behind closed lids. Even expression has given up its role. The cabin makes a quiet sound, somewhere assists settling rather than a movement. You register it dimly, then let it pass. There is no need to interpret it. Interpretation belongs to waking hours. Your breathing deepens again just slightly, as if your body has decided there is more room now. Each breath feels fuller than the last, but not heavier, comfortable, complete. You sense that the night has moved past its most demanding hours. There is a quality of patience now, a long, even stretch where nothing dramatic is likely to happen. This realization does not excite you, it reassures you. Sleep thickens again gently. Awareness begins to blur at the edges like ink soaking into paper. Sensation softens, thought loosens. The world narrows to warmth and quiet. You drift without direction, not falling, not floating, just remaining. The night holds its shape around you and you fit within it without effort. Somewhere beyond the cabin, snow continues to change the land. Inside, nothing changes at all. The contrast feels right. Your body remains still, resting in the position it chose earlier. There is no impulse to move, no discomfort asking to be addressed. Everything that needed adjustment has already been adjusted. The sense of self fades a little more. You are no longer thinking about resting. You are resting. The night continues slow and uneventful, and that's exactly what makes it safe. You remain sheltered, warmed, and unneeded by anything outside these walls. As awareness thins again, you slip deeper into sleep, not leaving anything behind, simply letting go of what is no longer necessary. The cabin stands, the storm continues. You rest within the space between them, carried quietly forward by time. You do not wake so much as notice that you're breathing differently. Each breath feels visible now, not to the eye, but to the sense. Cool air brushes your lips, then warms as it travels inward. A faint cloud forms and fades in front of your face, something you sense rather than see. Even wrapped in layers, winter leaves its signature on every inhale. Your breath moves slowly, deliberately, as if it has learned the pace of the night. There is no hurry in it. Inhale stretches gently through your chest. Exhale softens everything it touches. The air beneath the blanket feels slightly warmer than the air near your face, creating a small pocket of comfort that grows with every cycle. You notice how the cabin air feels different now than it did earlier. It carries the weight of hours spent breathing and resting, shaped by fire and bodies and stillness. The sharp edge of cold has dulled. The air feels worn and familiar, like fabric that has been handled many times. Your lips part slightly as you rest. Breath moves freely unrestrained. The muscles around your mouth have fully relaxed, letting warmth escape and return without effort. This quiet exchange feels intimate, a conversation between body and night that does not require words. People who live through winters like this learn to pay attention to breath in ways that went beyond comfort. Breath was proof of warmth, of life, continuing, of balance holding. Lying here, you feel that awareness settle into you, calm rather than anxious. Each breath confirms that nothing needs fixing. Your chest rises and falls with a steady rhythm. The motion feels deeper than it did earlier, slower and more complete. The body has entered a state where repair happens quietly without conscious direction. Muscles release what they have been holding. Tension drains without ceremony. You sense the cold at the edges of awareness near your cheeks and nose, but it no longer feels invasive. It marks contrast rather than threat. Warmth belongs to your center. Cool belongs to the air, each stays in its place. The fire across the room continues its quiet exchange with the cabin. You do not hear it clearly. You feel its effect instead, a soft counterpoint to the cold that brushes your breath. The two coexist without conflict. Your hands rest where they have settled, fingers loose and open. Breath warms them slightly with each exhale. Skin tingles faintly, not from cold but from circulation redistributing itself now that movement has stopped. Outside, the storm remains present but distant. Snow continues to fall, but its presence reaches you only through the way the air feels when you breathe. Thick snow softens the world, holding cold steady rather than sharp. Your thoughts do not linger long enough to form questions. They appear as gentle observations and fade again. Breath becomes the anchor, the only rhythm worth noticing. You remain still, allowing each inhale and exhale to arrive and depart on their own schedule. There is comfort in not guiding the process and trusting the body to know what it needs. The blanket shifts almost imperceptibly as your chest rises and falls. Fabric responds, then rests. Nothing resists the motion, everything moves together. Your awareness drifts again, settling somewhere between sensation and absence. Breath continues whether you notice it or not. Warmth remains, shelter remains. You sink deeper into rest, carried by the steady rise and fall that marks life continuing quietly through the longest part of the night. There is a sense now that the night is moving, even though nothing around you appears to change. It is not a sound or a shift in temperature that gives it away. It is a subtle easing, as if the darkness itself has begun to loosen its hold. You feel it before you understand it, the way people often sense dawn long before light appears. Your body remains heavy and relaxed, but awareness floats closer to the surface again. Not sharply, not urgently, just enough to notice that rest has deepened and then begun to turn like a tide, reversing without waves. Sleep still holds you, but it does not press as firmly as it did earlier. Breath continues its slow rhythm, but it feels slightly fuller now, as if there is more room in your chest. Each inhale seems to stretch a little longer. Each exhale releases warmth with a quiet certainty. The air near your face feels cooler than the air beneath the blanket, but the contrast feels gentle, not demanding. The cabin feels unchanged, yet different. Walls still stand, the roof still holds, but the space feels less tense, as though it no longer needs to brace against the storm. Whatever weight snow placed on it earlier has settled into a stable shape. The structure has accepted the night, and that acceptance carries through everything inside. You lie without moving, letting this shift happen on its own. There is no reason to adjust position, no discomfort asking to be answered. Your body has learned the shape of rat here and stays within it easily. Somewhere outside, snow continues to fall, but its presence feels softer now. Not lighter, just less insistent. The storm seems to be spending the last of its energy quietly, grain by grain, without the sharp edges it had earlier in the night. Your thoughts drift briefly, forming the faint idea of morning. Not morning itself, just the possibility of it. Light behind clouds, cold air waiting beyond the door, work that will come later. None of it carries weight yet. It exists as a distant outline, not something you need to prepare for. The blanket rests evenly across your body, its weight familiar and reassuring. Fabric has warmed to you over hours of stillness no longer cool to the touch. The straw beneath you holds its shape, offering steady support without softness or resistance. Your hands remain relaxed, palms open, fingers resting where they fell. There is no tension left to release. Even the small muscles around your eyes feel loose and at ease. The fire across the room continues its quiet work, though. You sense it less clearly now. Its warmth blends fully into the room, no longer arriving in noticeable waves. Heat has become part of the environment rather than an event. Time feels less stretched here, less endless. The long middle of the night has passed. What remains feels finite, though still unhurried. You do not count the hours. You simply sense that the hardest part is behind you. Your breathing deepens once more, then settles into a steady, comfortable pace. Each breath feels complete, needing no adjustment. The body is no longer conserving energy against uncertainty. It rests with confidence. The cabin remains quiet. No new sounds arrive. No changes demand attention. Everything holds in a calm agreement that nothing more is required right now. You drift again, not sinking deeper this time, but floating in a lighter layer of sleep. Awareness comes and goes without friction. Sensation fades and returns softly, never sharp enough to wake you fully. The night continues to move toward its end. Though it does so slowly, respectfully, without interruption, you remain wrapped in warmth and stillness, carried forward by time rather than pushing against it. Rest remains easy. Shelter remains steady. You lie exactly where you are, breathing quietly, letting the final stretch of night pass in its own way. You remain still, but your thoughts begin to wander outward again, reaching beyond the cabin walls without urgency. It feels natural now to think about others, not because you are lonely, but because the night has softened you into a wider awareness. Somewhere beyond the snow, other homes are holding warmth in similar ways. Other fires breathe. Other people lie awake or asleep, listening to storms with the same quiet patience. The idea does not come with faces or names. It arrives as a feeling of distance bridged by circumstance. Snow has narrowed the world for everyone tonight, drawing small circles of light and warmth around scattered shelters. You picture them without effort, cabins pressed low against the land chimneys, breathing faintly, doors buried and waiting. Your own cabin feels connected to those unseen places, not by roads or paths which are surely gone now, but by shared conditions. The same cold, the same snow, the same long hours of waiting. That connection brings comfort rather than concern. You're not alone in this pause. The land has asked everyone to slow at once. You shift your head slightly on the pillow, a small adjustment that barely disturbs the rest of your body. The movement feels instinctive, not corrective. Everything still works. Warmth holds. Breath remains steady. There is no reason to change more than that. The thought of neighbours comes again, quieter this time. You imagine lights dimmed early to conserve fuel, meals eaten simply, conversations fading into silence as sleep took over. Even miles apart, the rhythm feels shared. Winter creates these invisible alignments, pulling people into similar routines, whether they intended or not. Your breathing deepens as the thought settles. Inhale brings warmth inward. Exhale releases it slowly. The cycle feels unbroken, as if it could continue like this indefinitely. There is no impatience in it, no expectation of interruption. Outside, the snow continues to reshape everything. Fences disappear, landmarks soften. The world becomes flatter, quieter, more alike from place to place. Inside, the sameness feels reassuring rather than dull. Predictability is safety on nights like this. You notice how the cabin seems to shrink slightly in your perception, not because it has changed, but because your awareness has expanded beyond it. The walls still hold firm, but your sense of space reaches further now, carrying you outward while your body remains at rest. Your hands remain relaxed near your chest, fingers loose and warm. The blanket rests evenly, its weight familiar and comforting. You feel no drafts now. Snow has sealed the cabin into a stable shape, reducing movement until the air itself seems to pause. Time drifts again, stretching into something that feels shared rather than personal. You're not waiting for morning. You're simply existing in this long interval held in place by conditions that feel larger than you, but not hostile. The fire continues its quiet presence across the room, no longer noticeable as heat or sound, just as a condition that allows rest to continue. You trust it without thinking. Trust has replaced monitoring completely. Your thoughts soften further, losing edges. The idea of neighbours fades into the idea of people in general, then into the idea of presence itself. Something is happening everywhere at night, even if nothing dramatic occurs. Snow falls, fires burn, breath rises and falls. You feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that nothing is expected of you right now. No decision, no action, just rest. The night has taken responsibility for itself. Your breathing remains slow and full. Each breath seems to carry a little more ease than the last. Muscles sink deeper into the bedding, finding a final shape that feels settled and complete. The sense of distance grows again, but now it feels peaceful rather than vast. The world outside exists without pressure. You do not need to imagine it clearly. Knowing it is there is enough. The cabin holds steady. The roof bears its load. The walls remain still. These truths sit beneath awareness like solid ground beneath snow. You do not test them, you trust them. You drift again, not deeper or lighter, just quieter. Thoughts thin until they are little more than impressions. Warmth, stillness, continuity. The night continues, carrying everyone within it toward the same quiet hours. You remain where you are, wrapped in layers and patience, breathing softly as time moves on without effort. Rest deepens not because you try to sleep, but because there is nothing left to resist. Shelter, warmth, and shared stillness have done their work. You let the sense of a connection fade gently, leaving behind only calm. The cabin becomes your whole world again, small and sufficient. Sleep carries you onward untroubled, as the snow outside continues to fall and settle, linking distant places in silence. The night thins a little more, not enough to call it morning, but enough that your rest begins to feel lighter. You are not awake. You are simply closer to waking than you were before. The difference is subtle, like the first easing of tension after holding something heavy for a long time. Your body notices this shift before your thoughts do. Breathing becomes slightly fuller, chest expanding a bit more with each inhale. The warmth beneath the blanket feels steady and reliable, no longer something you monitor, just something you live inside. Cold still exists beyond the walls, but it feels distant, now contained. You remain curled in the same position, limbs settled into shapes they have chosen and kept. There is no urge to stretch yet. Stretching belongs to later. For now, stillness remains the most comfortable option, like staying under water where everything moves slowly and sound is softened. The cabin feels calm in a way that suggests it has passed through effort and come out the other side intact. Nothing creaks, nothing shifts. Even the small sounds that once marked adjustment have got quiet. Wood and snow seem to have reached an agreement that will last until daylight interferes. Your thoughts drift lazily, brushing against ideas without holding on to them. The notion of routine appears briefly, the way mornings usually begin after storms. Clearing snow, checking doors, listening for the sounds of life returning outside. These thoughts do not pull you forward. They hover and then drift away again, leaving you where you are. You notice how safe it feels to think about the next steps without needing to act on them. Planning does not create urgency tonight. It simply reminds you that this pause has an end, even if that end is still far off. The blanket rises and falls with your breathing, its movement so gentle it barely registers. Fabric has moulded itself to you over hours of rest, no longer stiff or cool. It feels like part of the space now, rather than something placed on top of you. Your hands remain relaxed, fingers resting naturally rather than curled or clenched. The small muscles that once guarded warmth have learned that guarding is no longer necessary. Heat holds without effort, now circulating quietly. Outside, the storm has likely changed shape again, though you do not sense it directly. Snow that once fell heavily now settles into stillness. Wind that once tested surfaces now slides past without force. The world beyond the cabin feels paused, waiting for light to return before it moves again. You sense that this waiting is shared by everything around you. Trees burdened with snow, fences buried and quiet, paths erased and resting. Even animals tucked away somewhere nearby remain still conserving energy in the same way you are. Your awareness floats, gently touching on these impressions without fully forming images. The mind remains kind to itself at this hour, refusing to sharpen anything unnecessarily. Breathing deepens once more, slower and calmer. Each exhale seems to sink you further into the bedding, as if gravity itself has grown a little stronger. You welcome the sensation, letting your weight rest fully where it belongs. There is no need to check the fire, no need to listen for change. The night has proven itself steady enough to trust. Trust has become the dominant feeling, now replacing vigilance completely. You lie in this trust without effort. It supports you the way the cabin does, quietly and without asking for attention. Nothing is demanded. Nothing is expected. The sense of time shifts again, becoming less important than sensation. Minutes pass or do not pass. Hours stretch or compress. None of it matters while rest continues this easily. Your thoughts soften further, becoming more like followings than ideas. Warmth feels good. Stillness feels right. Shelter feels complete. Each impression arrives and fades without disturbance. You remain here, suspended between deeper sleep and the approach of morning, held in a gentle balance that does not require choice. The night carries you without hurry, and you allow it to do so. There is a subtle change in the quality of the dark, something so faint you would miss it if you were fully awake. It is not light yet, not even close, but the darkness no longer feels endless. It feels shaped, as if it now has edges you cannot see but somehow sense. Your body remains still, but awareness floats nearer the surface again. Sleep has done its deepest work, and now it loosens slightly, not letting go, just easing its hold. You remain wrapped in warmth, muscles heavy and content, but the mind begins to drift more freely. Breathing continues at its slow pace, though. Each inhale feels a touch more expansive. Your chest rises with a quiet confidence, as if the body knows the hardest part of the night has passed. Exhale follows, gently releasing warmth without urgency. The cabin feels unchanged, yet calmer in a different way than before. Earlier calm came from vigilance satisfied. Now it comes from endurance completed. Wood has settled fully, snow has stopped shifting. Everything has found its overnight shape and is content to keep it. You lie without moving, noticing how complete stillness feels now. Earlier stillness required discipline. Now it arrives naturally. Your limbs feel placed rather than positioned, as if they belong exactly where they are. Your thoughts wander again, but they do not reach far. They circle close to the present moment, a sense of quiet success. The simple relief of having stayed warm through the longest hours. The knowledge that shelter has done what it was meant to do. Outside, the world remains silent beneath its covering. Snow holds sound, tightly flattening the landscape into something smooth and uninterrupted. Nothing moves with speed, nothing announces itself, everything waits. You sense that waiting has become collective. The land waits, the cabin waits, your body waits. Not for anything specific, just for the slow return of light that will eventually signal change. Your hands rest loosely against your chest, fingers warm and relaxed. There is no trace of the earlier tension that came with guarding warmth. The heat you built has stayed with you steady and dependable. The blanket feels heavier now, not because it has changed, but because your body is fully settled beneath it. The pressure feels comforting, grounding you in place. You do not resist it, you let it hold you. Your breathing deepens again, then steadies. Each breath feels complete on its own, not part of a sequence you need to track. The rhythm carries you quietly, neither pulling you towards sleep nor pushing you toward waking. A faint impression of light appears somewhere behind your eyelids. Not an image, just a suggestion. You do not follow it. You let it drift by knowing it belongs to later. You remain in this in-between space where rest still dominates, but awareness has room to stretch. It feels peaceful rather than restless, like floating rather than hovering. The cabin continues to exist around you without demanding attention. Walls stand, roof holds, floor supports. These truths are so settled now they barely register. Outside, the storm has finished its main work. Snow rests where it fell. Wind has moved on. The world has been reshaped quietly without spectacle. Inside, you remain unchanged, warm and still, carried forward by time rather than effort. The night no longer tests anything, it simply remains. You drift gently, letting this final stretch of darkness hold you without resistance, knowing that when change arrives, it will do so gradually without shock. For now, you stay exactly where you are, breathing softly, wrapped in shelter and patience, resting in the calm that comes after endurance. You sense the coming of light before there is anything to see. It arrives as a shift rather than an event, a quiet loosening of the night's grip that moves through the cabin without sound. Darkness no longer feels absolute. It feels temporary, as if it has begun to step aside. Your body responds first. Breathing becomes a little deeper, a little more spacious, as though there is room for it now. The warmth beneath the blanket remains steady, but it no longer feels like something you must protect. It feels established, settled, something that will not vanish the moment you move. You stay still, allowing this change to unfold on its own. There is no reason to rush toward wakefulness. The night has carried you this far without urgency, and the morning seems content to approach the same way. The cabin holds a different kind of quiet now. Earlier silence felt dense and enclosing. Now it feels open, as if space itself has expanded slightly. Even without sound, you can tell the world outside is beginning to stir, not with movement yet, but with readiness. Your thoughts return in fragments, not plans, not worries, just impressions, snow resting heavily, air waiting to warm. The idea of standing later, of moving, of stepping into a reshaped world. None of these thoughts press forward. They drift, then fade. You notice how rested your body feels, not refreshed in a modern sense, but complete, as if it has finished something important. Muscles lie heavy and relaxed. Joints feel quiet. The small aches you noticed earlier have softened into nothing in particular. The blanket still presses gently across your body. Its weight feels familiar and reassuring, a reminder of the hours it has spent holding warmth close. You're aware that soon you will leave it, but that awareness carries no reluctance. Everything feels timed just right. A faint coolness brushes your face again, lighter than before. The air feels different now, less sharp, more open. It carries the promise of movement rather than threat. You breathe in slowly, letting it mix with warmth before it reaches your chest. Outside, snow lies still, having finished its work for now. Wind has moved on. The world feels paused, waiting for light to give permission for motion to return. You remain curled slightly inward, not because you need to, but because it feels natural. The position has become part of you over the night, and you do not abandon it until you are ready. Awareness grows clearer but gently. There is no sudden return of thought or urgency, just a gradual brightening inside, a readiness to re-enter the day when it arrives. You sense that this is one of the quietest moments of the night, the brief pause between endurance and activity. Everything holds still together. Cabin, snow, body, breath. Your breathing steadies at a pace that feels awake enough to notice, yet calm enough to remain restful. Each inhale feels clean, each exhale feels complete. You lie there suspended in this in-between space where night has not fully released you and morning has not yet asked for anything. It feels peaceful rather than uncertain. Soon you will move, soon you will rise, but not yet. For now you remain where you are, wrapped in warmth and stillness, letting the first hints of dawn settle quietly into the cabin without disturbance. Light begins to exist before it becomes visible. You notice it as a thinning of shadow, a gentle lifting of the dark that has held the cabin all night. Shapes do not appear yet, but the absence of shape feels different now, less complete, as if the room is preparing to reveal itself again. Your eyes remain closed, but the change reaches you anyway. The darkness behind your eyelids feels softer, less dense. Your body responds with a deeper breath, one that expands easily without the careful restraint of the night. Warmth still surrounds you, steady and reliable, but it no longer feels fragile. You lie quietly, allowing this transition to happen without interruption. There is no reason to sit up or stretch yet. The night has not fully released you and the morning has not yet asked for movement. This moment belongs to neither. It floats between calm and unclaimed. The cabin feels larger now, not because it has changed, but because your awareness has widened. You sense the walls again, the space between them, the ceiling overhead. Everything feels stable, settled into its morning shape after hours of snow and stillness. Your thoughts begin to return with a little more clarity, but they remain slow and gentle. You think of simple things. The feel of the floor beneath bare feet later. The sound of snow compacting under boots. The weight of the door when you finally open it. These ideas drift through without urgency, like possibilities rather than plans. Breathing feels different now too. Air seems to move more freely, carrying a faint freshness that was not there before. Even inside the cabin, the night air has changed character. It feels less closed in, less guarded, as if it knows it will soon be replaced. You notice how comfortable your body feels in this last stretch of rest. Muscles remain loose. Joints feel quiet. There is no stiffness yet, no ache calling for attention. That will come later. For now, everything rests in a rare balance. The blanket lies across you exactly as it has for hours, but it feels lighter somehow. Not because it weighs less, but because your body is no longer fighting the cold beneath it. Warmth feels complete rather than concentrated. You could move without losing it now. Sound has not returned yet. The world outside remains hushed, held in that brief silence that comes before morning truly begins. Snow absorbs everything, creating a stillness that feels intentional, as if the land itself is resting after the long work of the storm. You remain still, honouring this quiet. There is a sense that moving too soon would break something delicate, though you cannot say what. You let the moment be what it is, knowing it will not last long. Awareness sharpens just a little more. You could open your eyes now and see the room taking shape again, but you choose not to. There is comfort in letting the day arrive without watching it closely. Your breathing settles into a calm, awake rhythm. Not the deep pull of sleep, not the quick pace of activity. Something in between. Each breath feels ready rather than heavy. The night has done its work. The storm has passed. Shelter has held, a rest has taken root. You feel a quiet satisfaction in that, not pride, just a simple sense of things having gone as they should. You lie there for a little longer, wrapped in warmth and patience, letting the final traces of night dissolve on their own. Morning will arrive whether you hurry it or not. For now, you stay exactly where you are, eyes closed, breathing steadily, resting in the calm that comes just before the day begins. Morning arrives without ceremony. There is no sudden brightness, no clear boundary where night ends and day begins. Instead, light seeps quietly into the cabin, settling into corners, softening shadows, revealing shapes you already know by heart. You sense it through closed eyes before you open them, the way you sensed the storm long before it arrived. Your body responds gently. Fingers twitch once, then rest again. Breath deepens, fuller now, no longer guarded. Warmth still surrounds you, but it feels different. It feels shared with the room rather than defended from it. The cold has stepped back just enough to let movement feel possible. You open your eyes slowly. The cabin looks smaller in daylight, but also friendlier. Walls show their grain. The ceiling beams feel closer, familiar. Snowlight filters through the window, pale and clean, reflecting off everything it touches. Outside, the world has been transformed. Edges are softened. Distance is erased. Everything looks quieter than it did yesterday. You remain lying down for a moment longer, letting your body register that the night is over. Muscles feel heavy but cooperative. There is no rush to sit up. Morning will wait. It always does. The fire has burned low, leaving behind a soft bed of ash and embers. Enough warmth remains to keep the cabin comfortable for now. You know that soon you will tend it again, but not yet. This moment belongs to stillness. You stretch slightly, careful and unhurried. The movement feels earned. Joints respond without complaint. Blood moves back into places that rested all night. The blanket shifts and settles again, releasing warmth slowly rather than all at once. You sit up at last, feet finding the floor. The cold there is real but manageable. It feels honest rather than hostile. You stand grounding yourself, taking in the quiet. Outside nothing moves yet. Snow holds everything in place, waiting. This is the calm after endurance, the moment when survival gives way to routine again. You feel it settle into you without thought. The night did not break you. The storm did not outmatch preparation. Shelter did its work, so did patience. You take one more breath, steady and full, then prepare to meet the day shaped by snow and silence. Wind down. You pause before doing anything else. There is no need to hurry into motion, no need to speak or think too loudly. The cabin feels peaceful in the daylight, almost gentle, as if it is resting to after holding you through the night. Outside the snow waits. It reflects light upward, filling the world with a soft brightness that feels calming rather than sharp. Everything looks slower this morning. Sound carries less. Distance feels shorter. The land seems content to stay still a little longer. You stand quietly breathing in the cold air that has lost its edge. It no longer feels threatening. It feels clean, familiar. The kind of cold that reminds you that you are awake and alive, not the kind that demands defense. Your body feels calm and capable, not energized, not heavy, balanced. The kind of balance that comes from rest that mattered. You think briefly about how many nights like this were lived one after another, each one endured not through comfort but through understanding, through listening, through knowing when to act and when to stay still. That knowledge lingers now even as the night fades. It settles into you gently like snow settling onto ground that is ready to receive it. You let your shoulders relax, let your breath slow once more. There is nothing pressing on you now. The hardest part is over. For a moment longer you stay in the quiet. The cabin stands, the snow rests, the day waits patiently. And as you step forward into whatever comes next, you carry the calm of the night with you, steady and unhurried.